Hey guys, tonight we are going on a very peculiar kind of journey. We're heading back to ancient Rome, but we're not going to the Colosseum to see gladiators, and we're not attending a lavish senatorial banquet. Frankly, you'd probably get a stomach bug from the food anyway. Instead, we're going to explore something far more common, something you could hold in the palm of your hand, yet something that was arguably more powerful than any single legion pocket change. It sounds mundane, I know, but this is where the real story is. This is about power propaganda and the ancient world's version of personal branding. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It helps the channel find other people like us who enjoy these quiet dives into the past. And while you're at it, I'd love to see where you're listening from. Let me know in the comments your city and what time it is for you right now. It's always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this, you are standing in a bustling marketplace, somewhere on the edge of the Roman Republic, maybe 100 years before the first emperor. The air is thick with the smell of baked bread, olives, and a faint, dusty scent of livestock. You hear a dozen different languages and dialects, a chaotic symphony of commerce. You're buying a small measure of wine, and you hand over a few bronze coins. You don't really look at them. Why would you? They're just money. But then, you get your change, a silver denarius. It feels cool and heavy in your palm. Out of curiosity, you stop and actually look at it. You see a face, but it's not a photograph. It's a stylized, powerful profile. Perhaps it's the goddess Roma, with her plumed helmet, looking eternally vigilant. Or maybe it's Janus, the two-faced god of beginnings and endings, looking both to the past and the future. You might even see the mythical twins, Castor and Pollux, on horseback. These are images of gods, of legends, of the very foundation of Rome itself. They represent stability, divine favor, and the collective identity of the Republic. What you absolutely will not see under any circumstances is the face of a living Roman. To put your own face on a coin while you were still breathing, that was the ultimate act of hubris. It was what kings did, and if there was one thing the Roman Republic was built on, it was a deep, centuries-old hatred of kings. This is the central role we need to understand before our journey can truly begin. The coin in your hand is not just a tool for buying bread. It's a statement of political ideology. It's a tiny, mass-produced billboard that says, "We are governed by institutions, by gods, and by the memory of our ancestors, not by the whims of one man." Every merchant, every soldier, every farmer who used this coin was participating in that belief, whether they consciously thought about it or not. The coin was the state's message, and the message was no kings here. This system worked for centuries. The designs changed, of course. Different powerful families who were in charge of the mint would sometimes put symbols of their own lineage on the back, a famous battle their ancestor won, or a public work they funded. But the front, the obverse, was reserved for the divine or the symbolic. It was sacred ground. Now let's talk about the coin itself, the physical object. It's not perfect like a modern coin. It was struck by hand. A craftsman would place a blank metal disc, called a flan, between two engraved dies. Then another worker, with a very large hammer, would strike it with immense force. Thwack, one coin made. The result was often a little off-center, the pressure not quite even. Some coins were sharper, some softer. This human element is part of their charm. Some of these ancient coins even had little serrated edges like a bottle cap. They are called denarii serrati. For a long time, people thought this was just decorative, but one of the leading theories is that it was an early anti-counterfeiting measure. By cutting notches in the edge, the mint was proving that the coin was solid silver all the way through, not just a cheap bronze core with a silver plating. A clever if labor-intensive solution. But the core idea remains. The coin is a public space, a canvas for the identity of Rome. And for hundreds of years, that identity was collective. It was Republican. The thought of a single man, a politician or a general, seizing that space for his own face was politically explosive. It would be like a modern president replacing George Washington's face with their own on the dollar bill. It's just not done. Historians still argue about how deeply the average person in that marketplace would have analyzed these images. Did they see the head of Roma and think, ah, a reassuring symbol of our state's enduring strength? Or was it more like the logo on your credit card today? You recognize it. You trust it, but you don't spend your days pondering its graphic design. The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. It was a background hum of state power, a constant, subtle reminder of who was in charge. It was the most effective form of mass media in the ancient world, precisely because it was seen as media. It was just money, and it is on this quiet, accepted tradition that our story will turn, because a man is coming. A man with unprecedented ambition, a genius for politics, and an ego that can no longer be contained by the old rules. He is about to look at this small, silver coin in your hand and see not a symbol of the Republic, but a platform, an opportunity. Each is about to put his own face on it, and in doing so, he will sign his own death warrant, and unknowingly lay the foundation for an empire. That man, of course, is Gaius Julius Caesar. And by the time he starts thinking about coins, he is no longer just a general or a politician. He is the undisputed master of Rome. The civil wars are over, his enemies are defeated, and the Senate, with a mixture of fear and feigned adoration, has just named him dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. It's a title that shatters every Republican tradition. It smells, looks, and feels an awful lot like king. Now you are in Rome in the final, feverish months of 40 for BC. The city is a strange mix of relief and tension. The wars are done, but one man has all the power, and you can feel the political ground shifting beneath your feet. Then, one day you're buying bread at the same market stall, and you get your change. You're handed a denarius. You glance at it, just as you have thousands of times before. But this time you stop. You stare. Something is profoundly, shockingly wrong. The goddess Roma is gone. Janus is gone. The divine twins are gone. Staring back at you from that small circle of silver is a man's face. And you recognize him. Everyone does. It's Caesar. It isn't an idealized, god-like portrait. It's brutally, uncomfortably real. This is the style we now call vers in. You see the deep lines etched on his forehead and the creases around his mouth. You can almost count the folds of skin on his neck. His hair is noticeably thinning on top, a detail he was known to be sensitive about. This isn't the face of a god or a myth. It's the tired, middle-aged, and supremely powerful face of the man who controls your world. On the coin beside his head are his new titles, including that fateful one, DICTPERPETEVO. It's not just a portrait, it's a press release, a decoration. To understand how radical this was, you have to know a little bit about Roman ancestor worship. For centuries, elite Roman families kept wax masks, called images of their distinguished ancestors. These were death masks, hyper-realistic portraits of the deceased. On special occasions like funerals, family members would wear these masks in a procession, a ghostly parade of the family's greatest hits. It was a way of honoring the dead and reminding everyone of your family's long history of service to the Republic. What Caesar did was take this tradition, this art style reserved for honoring the dead, and apply it to himself while he was very much alive. He was essentially telling the world, you don't need to wait until I'm dead to honor me. Let's start now. This was Caesar's dangerous selfie. By putting his own living, wrinkled face on the currency of the Republic, he crossed a line that no one had dared to cross before. He took the public space of the coin and made it his personal property. It was a breathtaking act of ego. And here is where historians pull up their chairs and start arguing, a debate that continues to this day. What was Caesar really thinking? Was this a calculated move to condition the Roman people to the idea of a monarchy, following the tradition of Hellenistic kings like Alexander the Great, who had their own portraits on coins? Or was he a pragmatist who, seeing the Republic was broken beyond repair, was simply using the most effective mass media tool at his disposal to communicate the new reality of one-man rule across a vast and diverse territory? Some argue it was an act of supreme arrogance, a fatal miscalculation of the Senate's mood. Others suggest it was a necessary step to create a new, stable political identity for a state that had outgrown its old system. We will never know for sure if it was a deliberate provocation or a tone-deaf act of personal branding. What we do know is how it was received. For his soldiers out on the frontiers, men loyal to him personally, receiving a coin with their general's face on it was probably a source of pride. It was a tangible link to their commander and the source of their pay. But for the old aristocratic families in Rome, the senators who still clung to the ideals of the Republic, this coin was the ultimate proof of their worst fears. It was a confession. In their eyes, this small piece of silver was a tyrant's manifesto. Every time a senator paid for a scroll, or a merchant gave change, or a child bought a sweet, Caesar's face was there, a constant reminder of his absolute power. The coin traveled from hand to hand, spreading his image and his new, permanent title to every corner of the empire. But back in Rome, in the shadowy halls of the Senate House, it was being passed around for a different reason. It was Exhibit A in the case against him. It hardened the resolve of the conspirators. They could look at that coin and see the face of the man they believed was destroying the Republic. They could point to the lines on his neck and perhaps, just perhaps, it made it easier to imagine a dagger there. The coin was meant to cement his authority. Instead, it helped to sign his death warrant. In a few short weeks, on the Ides of March, Caesar would be assassinated. He left behind a legacy of genius, ambition, and a power vacuum. And he also left behind this one revolutionary idea, that the face of a living man could be the face of Rome. The precedent had been set, the taboo was broken, and the man who would come next, his young and brilliant heir, would pick up that idea and build an entire empire on it. With Caesar gone, Rome doesn't magically snap back to its old republican ways. Instead, it plunges into more chaos, more civil war. For over a decade, the big names of the era, Mark Antony, Brutus, Cassius, and Caesar's young heir, Octavian, all issue their own coins to pay their legions. They are, in essence, noblemen fighting a propaganda war. Some, like the assassins Brutus and Cassius, ironically stamped their own faces on coins to assert their authority, the very act they killed Caesar for. But out of this bloody free-for-all, one man emerges victorious. Caesar's grandnephew and adopted son, the young, calculating, and utterly brilliant Octavian. By 31 BC, after the final showdown at the Battle of Actium, all his rivals are dead. Octavian, not yet 33 years old, is the sole ruler of the Roman world. But he has a massive problem. He has all the power, just like his adoptive father, Julius Caesar. And he knows exactly what happened to Caesar. The Roman people and the Senate are exhausted by war, but they are still deeply suspicious of anything that looks like a king. So how do you hold absolute power without looking like you're holding absolute power? How do you rebrand a dictatorship into something palatable, even desirable? This is where you see the true genius of the man we now call Augustus. You are living in this new era. The wars are over. A profound sense of peace and relief settles over the city. You start to see new coins appearing in your purse, and they are different. They carry Octavianus' face. Yes, the precedent has been set, but the style is a total departure from Caesar's harsh realism. Where Caesar's coin showed a tired, aging man, Octavianus' face is youthful, serene, and impossibly perfect. He looks like a Greek god carved from marble. There are no wrinkles, no receding hairline, no signs of stress. This is not the face of a man who has spent the last 13 years ruthlessly maneuvering on fighting his way to the top. This is the face of a savior, a figure of calm authority and divine grace. He has adopted the visual language of classical Greek art, the idealized forms of gods and heroes. It's a deliberate, calculated aesthetic choice. He is not saying, "I am your boss." He is whispering, "I am the vessel through which the gods have restored order." And then there's the text. He meticulously avoids any title that sounds like king or dictator. Instead, he takes on a new name, one granted to him by the Senate, Augustus. It means the revered one or the illustrious one. It's a name heavy with religious and moral authority, but crucially, no legal power. His official title on the coins is simply Caesar Evi Filius, son of the divine Caesar. This is a masterstroke of branding. HES not claiming divinity for himself, not yet. HES just reminding everyone that his adoptive father, the great Julius Caesar, was officially deified by the Senate after his death. So Augustus isn't a god king. HES just the pious son of a god dutifully serving the state. It's a political masterclass in having your cake and eating it too. HES also careful about what's on the other side of the coin, the reverse. Where Caesar's coins were all about him, Augustus's coins tell a story about Rome. You see images of the goddess of peace, Pax, lounging with a cornucopia. You see the temple of Janus, its doors ceremoniously closed to signify the end of war. You see a crocodile, a symbol of his victory over Cleopatra and Egypt, which brought immense wealth into Roman coffers. Each coin is a mini billboard advertising the benefits of his rule, peace, prosperity, and the restoration of tradition. One of the cleverest and most debated examples of his branding is the Capricorn coin. Augustus was born under the sign of Capricorn, and he adopted it as his personal emblem. He minted coins showing his celestial sign holding a globe, with a ship's rudder and a cornucopia. What does that even mean? Historians still debate the precise interpretation. Is it that his destiny, written in the stars, was to steer the ship of state, the rudder, towards an era of plenty, the cornucopia for the whole world, the globe? It's a beautifully vague and potent piece of astrological propaganda. It elevates his rule from a mere political reality to a cosmic destiny. This was just a political campaign. It was a universe-wide marketing strategy. And here's a quirky little detail about the production. Augustus centralized the minting of gold and silver coins. Before him, mints were more decentralized. He established major imperial mints, most notably at Lugdunum in modern-day Lyon, France. This meant he had total quality control over the message. Every single gold or Essen silver denarius, from Britain to Syria, would now carry the exact same, perfectly crafted image of him as the serene god, like bringer of peace. It was the most consistent, empire-wide branding campaign the world had ever seen. He was creating a unified visual identity for a new political order. So you, the ordinary Roman citizen, are living through this transition. The chaos and fear of the civil wars fade into memory. You look at the coins in your hand. Caesar's face was a shock, a raw display of power. But Augustus's face, it's reassuring. It's handsome. It speaks of stability. HES not shoving his power in your face. HES selling you a lifestyle brand, the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. He called himself Princeps, or first citizen, not emperor. He proclaimed he had restored the Republic. It was, of course, a beautifully constructed fiction. The Republic was a hollowed-out shell, and he held all the strings. But it was a fiction people wanted to believe. And his coins, with their perfect, ageless face and messages of peace and prosperity, helped them believe it. He ruled for over 40 years, and for that entire time, his portrait on the coins barely aged a day. He was eternally youthful, eternally serene. He was just an emperor. He was an icon. They brand, and he built it one coin at a time. Augustus was just thinking about his own brand. He was a master of long-term strategy. He knew that for his new system to last beyond his lifetime, it couldn't just be about him. He needed to establish the idea of a dynasty, a smooth, predictable line of succession. This was a concept utterly alien and hostile to Republican Rome, where magistrates were elected for short terms. So how do you introduce the concept of hereditary rule to a culture that despises kings? You do it subtly visually, and you start years in advance using the same tool you used to build your own brand, the coinage. You're a few years into Augustus's reign. The piece feels solid, secure. You're used to seeing his calm, classical face on every silver denarius. Then new coins start to appear. On the front, the obverse, you still see Augustus. He is the anchor, the guarantee of stability. But now when you flip the coin over, you see new faces on the reverse. You see the portraits of two young men, his grandsons, Gaius and Lucius Caesar. They are portrayed as handsome, noble youths, sometimes standing with shields and priestly implements. The inscription often calls them Principes, Iuventuti as princes of the youth. It's not a formal political title with any real power. It's a soft, aspirational title. It presents them to the empire not as future rulers, but as the promising next generation, the future hope of Rome. Augustus is using the prime real estate on the back of his coins to introduce his intended heirs to millions of people. Every time you handle a coin, you see Augustus on the front, and on the back, you see the boys he has chosen to follow him. It's a family portrait sent to every corner of the known world. This was a brilliant move. He was issuing a decree saying, "These boys will rule after me." That would have been too direct, too monarchical. Instead, he was using a slow, steady drip of visual propaganda. For years, people across the empire, from a soldier in Gaul to a merchant in Alexandria, would see the faces of Gaius and Lucius. They became familiar. Their future role was implied, not stated. It normalized the idea that power would pass through Augustus's bloodline. He was planting a seed in the public consciousness. Now, here's a sudden, fascinating little tangent. The ancient world was a brutal place for life expectancy. Augustus's grand dynastic plan, so carefully laid out on his coins, was completely wrecked by tragedy. Both Gaius and Lucius, the princes of the youth, died young, before Augustus himself. He had to pivot, so new coins were minted. The faces of Gaius and Lucius disappeared, and a new face appeared on the reverse, that of his stepson, Tiberius. Tiberius was a grim, awkward, middle-aged man and a brilliant general. He was not Augustus's first, second, or even third choice, but he was the one left standing. So Augustus, ever the pragmatist, adopted him as his son and heir, and the coin designs changed accordingly. Now you do see Augustus on the front, still ageless and serene. On the back, you might see a portrait of Tiberius, or a scene celebrating one of Tiberius's military victories. The message was clear. The succession plan has changed. This is the new guy. Get used to him. The most famous of these succession coins is the so-called tribute penny from the New Testament. This is the type of coin that was likely shown to Jesus when he gave his famous "Render unto Caesar" reply. On the front, it has a classic portrait of Augustus's successor Tiberius. On the reverse, it shows a seated female figure, often identified as Livia, Augustus's wife and Tiberius's mother, portrayed as the goddess of peace, Pax. The coin tells a complete dynastic story. Tiberius, the new emperor, is on the front. On the back, his mother Livia, the revered widow of the divine Augustus, represents the continuity of the peace her husband established. It connects Tiberius directly back to the founder of the dynasty and the prosperity he brought. Historians, of course, have a field day debating the nuances of this. How much of this dynastic promotion was Augustus's idea, and how much was driven by his formidable wife Livia. She was a powerful political player in her own right, and some ancient sources, though often hostile and gossipy, paint her as the true architect of Tiberius's rise to power. Was she influencing the coin designs to promote her son? It's almost impossible to prove, but the way she is represented on the coinage, often as a personification of Roman virtues like Salus, health, or Justitia, justice, shows that the imperial women were an integral part of this brand-building exercise. They were the public face of the dynasty's stability, piety, and fertility. So you see, the coin in your pocket is no longer just about one man. It's about a family. It's a tiny metal family album. It tells you not only who is in charge now, but who the emperor wants to be in charge next. Augustus used it to create the Julio-Claudian brand. He was the founder, the patriarch. Gaius and Lucius were the first attempt at a line extension. Tiberius was the slightly less exciting, but reliable, next-generation model. The coin was the primary medium for this grand, empire-wide marketing campaign for a concept that was still radical and new, the Roman imperial dynasty. It was a masterclass in selling the future, one denarius at a time. So we've established that the front of the coin, the obverse, is the emperor's official portrait, his carefully crafted profile picture for the world. But if you really want to hear what the emperor is thinking, what he is proud of, or what he wants you to believe, you need to flip the coin over. The reverse is where the real conversation happens. It's the B-side of the single, the status update, the part of the message that changes with the political weather. Let's take a closer look at one of these coins. You're holding a silver denarius from the early empire. You've already admired the emperor's face on the front. Let's say it's Augustus. Now turn it over. What you see is not just a random picture. Every element is a piece of a puzzle, a symbol meant to be read. First, the image itself. Let's say this coin shows a temple. It's depicted with meticulous detail. You can see the columns, the pediment, the statues on the roof. This isn't just any temple, it's a specific one. Perhaps the temple of Mars, Altar Mars, the Avenger, which Augustus built to commemorate his victory over Caesar's assassins. By putting this on a coin, HES doing several things at once. HES reminding everyone of his military might and his piety in honoring the gods. HES also advertising a major public works project, a bit like a modern politician cutting a ribbon at a new hospital. HES saying, look at this beautiful, expensive building I gave you. Your money is being put to good use. The message is one of piety, power, and civic generosity. Or maybe the image on the back is an allegorical figure or goddess. You see a woman holding a scale and a cornucopia. That's Aquitus, the personification of fairness and prosperity. The emperor is associating his reign with these concepts. HES not just a ruler, HES the guarantor of a just and wealthy state. Another popular figure was Onona, the goddess of the grain supply, often shown with a ship's prow in the background. Putting Onona on a coin was a crucial piece of PR, especially for the people of Rome. It was a promise that the grain ships from Egypt and Africa would continue to arrive, that the bread dole would be secure, and that there would be no famines under his watchful eye. For the average person, this was a far more important message than a distant military victory. Now, look at the text surrounding the image. It's not just gibberish. These abbreviations are a kind of ancient Roman shorthand. You might see the letters SC. This stands for Senatus Consul II, meaning by decree of the Senate. This was mostly found on bronze and copper coins. The small change of daily life that was, in theory, still under the Senate's control. By putting SC on these coins, the emperor was giving a nod to the old institution, maintaining the fiction that the Senate was still a partner in governance. It was a small but important gesture of political courtesy. You might also see a string of letters like TRP, followed by a Roman numeral. This stands for Tribuniciae Potestas, or Tribunician power. This was one of the emperor's most important powers, granting him the right to veto any magistrate and giving him personal inviolability. The crucial part is that this power was renewed annually. So, a coin that says TRPXV tells you it was minted in the 15th year of the emperor's Tribunician power. For historians, this is an absolute gift. It allows them to date coins with incredible precision, often down to a single year. For the Romans, it was a constant, subtle reminder of the emperor's long and stable reign. And here's a fantastic, nerdy little detail that numismatists, coin experts love. Sometimes on the bottom of the reverse, in the space called the exrig, you might find a few small letters. These could be mint marks, indicating the city where the coin was made. ROMA for Rome, LUG for Lugdunun. Sometimes they indicated which workshop officino within the mint produced the coin, using letters like P prima, S secunda, T tertia for the first, second, third workshop, and so on. This was a form of internal quality control. If a batch of coins was found to be underweight or impure, the authorities knew exactly which workshop to go and yell at. It's a tiny glimpse into the bureaucratic machinery behind this massive propaganda enterprise. The combination of the image and the text created a powerful layered message. A portrait of the emperor on the front established his authority. An image of a goddess like Pax Peace on the back highlighted the main benefit of his rule. And the titles in the inscription, like Pater Patria, Father of the Fatherland, reinforced his paternalistic role. But how much of this was understood by the person on the street? This is another one of those questions that keeps historians happily employed. Did the legionary on the German frontier consciously decode the message of Aquitus? Or did he just see woman with scales and know it was good money? The academic consensus is leaning towards a general rather than specific understanding. Most people probably cowed and treat the Latin inscriptions, especially in the Greek-speaking East, but images are a universal language. They would have recognized the emperor's face, a symbol of a military victory, or an image of prosperity, They got the gist. The coin communicated the mood music of the regime. It told you whether the official story was about peace, military strength, religious duty, or dynastic stability. The reverse of the coin was just a quiet whisper. It was the empire's official soundtrack, playing in the pockets of millions. After Augustus's incredibly long and stable reign, the empire faced its first real test of the new system. The brand he had so carefully built now had to be transferred to his successor, Tiberius. And this is where you, as a citizen of Rome, would start to feel the first hints of brand anxiety. It's like when a beloved, visionary CEO retires and a new, less charismatic guy takes over. Everyone is a little on edge. Tiberius was in an impossible position. He was following a man who had ruled for over 40 years and had been branded as a living legend. Tiberius was already in his mid-50s, a seasoned general but known for his dour, reserved personality. He was the handsome, godlike youth his stepfather had been. So what do you put on the coins? For the most part, Tiberius played it incredibly safe. His coin portraits are mature and serious, but they still carry a strong echo of Augustus's classicizing style. He was going to rock the boat. His most common coin, that tribute penny we mentioned, was the epitome of conservative branding. His portrait on the front, with the inscription Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. The message, I am the legitimate heir, carrying on the family business. The reverse, with the seated figure representing his mother Livia as Pax, reinforced the idea that he was continuing the Augustan peace. It was a message of pure continuity. Don't worry, folks, it's business as usual. But behind the scenes, Tiberius was famously reluctant to embrace the more grandiose aspects of imperial rule. He repeatedly refused divine honors and discouraged the Senate from being overly sycophantic. There's a quiet debate among historians about whether his conservative coinage reflects this personal modesty, or if it was simply a shrewd political calculation to avoid looking arrogant. Was he genuinely a reluctant emperor, or just a very careful brand manager? Then came the next transition, and this is where the imperial brand went completely off the rails. Tiberius was succeeded by his great-nephew, the young man we know as Caligula. Initially, Rome was overjoyed. They were rid of the gloomy, aging Tiberius and now had a vibrant young emperor, the son of the beloved hero Germanicus. His early coins reflect this honeymoon period. You see his portrait, and on the reverse, you often find portraits of his deceased family members, his father Germanicus, his mother Agrippina the Elder, and even his 3 sisters. He was presenting himself as the good son, the loyal brother, the inheritor of a noble lineage. It's a family-focused branding strategy designed to win public affection. You, as a Roman holding this coin, might feel a surge of optimism. The Julio-Claudian dynasty seemed to be in good hands. But then, things got weird. Caligula's reign descended into tyranny and megalomania, and his coins started to reflect his increasingly erratic personality. While Augustus had hinted at his divine connection, Caligula seemed to believe he was an actual, living god. He began to blur the lines in ways that made Romans deeply uncomfortable. For instance, he issued coins where his own portrait on the front was balanced by a depiction of the divine Augustus on the back. It created a visual equivalency between the living emperor and the deified founder of the empire, a step much further than Tiberius ever dared to take. Here's a specific and quite bizarre example of his branding. Caligula had a favorite sister, Drusilla, who died young. He was devastated. He had her officially deified, making her the first Roman woman to receive this honor. Then he issued coins depicting her as the goddess Concordia or Pax. That was strange enough. But he also minted coins showing a statue of himself in a temple, being waited on by his other 2 living sisters, who were depicted as the goddesses Securitas and Fortuna. He was turning his family drama into a public, religious spectacle on the currency. It was a level of personal oversharing and divine self-aggrandizement that was brand new and deeply unsettling. One of the most peculiar and debated coin types of his reign is a bronze sestertius. On the front is a simple, generic image of a liberty cap, the kind given to freed slaves. The inscription reads, "Liberty for the people restored by the princeps." On the reverse, Caligula is shown addressing the people with the simple inscription to the citizens he gave them. Historians argue endlessly over what this coin means. Was it minted early in his reign, a sincere gesture of populist goodwill, or was it a deeply cynical piece of propaganda issued later, trying to mask his tyranny with a hollow promise of freedom? Or, as some have suggested, was it a commemorative coin celebrating the abolition of a certain tax? The coin itself doesn't give us the context. It's a classic example of how a piece of imperial branding can be completely baffling without the key to its code. So, in the space of just 2 reigns after Augustus, you've seen 2 starkly different approaches to the brand. Tiberius, the successor, was all about cautious continuity. He was the brand manager afraid to change the winning formula. Caligula was the reckless heir who took over the family company and immediately started putting his own bizarre, self-obsessed stamp on everything. His coinage shows a brand in crisis, moving from feel-good family messaging to baffling and disturbing displays of personal ego. The coins are a direct reflection of the stability, or lack thereof, at the very top of the Roman world. And the average Roman, seeing these strange new designs, must have wondered what on earth was going on in the palace. After Caligula's brief and chaotic reign came to a predictably violent end, the imperial brand was in tatters. He had been assassinated by his own Praetorian Guard, and for a few tense hours, it seemed like the Senate might actually restore the Republic. But the guards had other ideas. Ransacking the palace, they reportedly found a man hiding behind a curtain, trembling in fear. This was Claudius, Caligula's uncle. He was 50 years old, had a limp, a stutter, and was considered by most of the imperial family to be a fool. The gods, in a moment of combined opportunism and inspiration, proclaimed him the new emperor. So now you are a citizen of Rome, and you're getting some very mixed messages. The Senate is talking about freedom, but the soldiers have just installed the idiot uncle as the new leader. Everyone expects him to be a puppet, a short-term solution. Claudius, however, turned out to be far more shrewd than anyone gave him credit for, and he immediately turned to the trusted to love imperial branding, the coinage, to build his own legitimacy and rewrite his personal story. His first coins are a masterclass in crisis communication. He needed to address the two that defined his rise to power, the Praetorian Guard and his own perceived weakness. So he minted special coins, gold aerie and silver denarii, with a very specific and unprecedented image on the reverse. It showed a Praetorian Guard encampment with a soldier standing guard holding a standard. The inscription read IMPRECEPT, which translates to the emperor having been received or taken it. He wasn't hiding the fact that the army put him in power. He was celebrating it. He was advertising the loyalty of the elite troops who made him emperor. It was a bold statement that said, "Yes, the army is with me. Any questions?" Simultaneously, he had to build his own prestige. He couldn't rely on a handsome, god-like portrait like Augustus. His physical infirmities were well known, so instead of focusing on his looks, he focused on his heritage and his actions. His portraits are realistic, but dignified. He looks serious and thoughtful, not weak. He heavily emphasized his connection to the imperial family. His full title on the coins often included references to his father, the great General Drusus, and his brother, the beloved hero Germanicus. He was saying, "You might think him a fool, but remember the heroic stock I come from." But Claudius knew that borrowing prestige wasn't enough. He needed a victory of his own, a real, tangible achievement he could put on his coins. So he did something that even the great Augustus had never managed, something Julius Caesar had only attempted. He successfully invaded and conquered a large part of Britain. This was a massive propaganda victory, and he milked it for all it was worth. You would have started seeing coins with a new reverse type, a triumphal arch, often with a statue of the emperor on horseback on top. The inscription would read D-B-R-I-T-I-N-N or D-B-R-I-T-A-N-N-I-S, on account of the Britons. He was advertising his conquest of this remote, mysterious island at the edge of the known world. For a Roman citizen, Britain was a place of myth and legend. Conquering it was a big deal. The coin in your pocket was now a miniature trophy, a testament to the emperor's military prowess. It didn't matter that Claudius himself was hardly a warrior and spent very little time there. On the coin, he was a world conqueror. Here's a small but fascinating detail of his branding. Claudius was also a bit of an antiquarian, a scholar with a deep interest in Roman history and traditions. This sometimes showed up on his coins. For example, he reintroduced the use of certain letters into the Latin alphabet that had fallen out of use. For a very brief period, you can find coins minted with these strange new Claudian letters. They didn't catch on word robbed after his death, but for a numismatist, finding a coin with one of these is like finding a rare misprint. It's a nerdy little testament to the emperor's intellectual hobbies, a strange footnote in the history of personal branding. The question of Claudius as true nature is another one of those great historical debates. Was he the bumbling fool described by some hostile ancient sources like Suetonius, who was simply lucky, uneasily manipulated by his powerful wives and freedmen? Or was he a cunning political operator who deliberately played the fool to survive the deadly court politics of Tiberius and Caligula, only to reveal his true intelligence when he finally came to power? His coinage suggests the latter. The branding is strategic, consistent, and effective. He took an impossible situation, a surprise accession with zero credibility, and built a solid, respectable brand based on military success, traditional values, and a clever acknowledgement of his military power base. You, living through his reign, would have witnessed a remarkable turnaround. The imperial brand, which had become synonymous with the erratic tyranny of Caligula, was restored to something stable and respectable. The coin in your hand no longer carried the image of a buzzer god-king, but of a serious, successful administrator. He may have limped and stammered, but his coins projected nothing but strength and traditional Roman virtue. He proved that you didn't need to be a handsome demigod to have a strong brand. You just needed a good story. And Claudius, the unexpected emperor, used his coins to tell a story of unlikely triumph. When Claudius died under suspicious circumstances, likely involving a plate of poisoned mushrooms courtesy of his wife, Agrippina the Younger, the throne passed to her son, the 16-year-old Nero. And with Nero, the imperial brand enters its most theatrical and, ultimately, self-destructive phase. His reign is a story told in 3 acts, and you can trace it perfectly through the evolution of his portrait on the coinage. You're in Rome, it's 54 AD. Hain, new emperor, a teenager, but HES, the great-grandson of Augustus, handsome, and seems eager to please. The first coins of his reign are a picture of dynastic harmony. You see a portrait of the young Nero, looking very much like a younger version of Augustus with a refined classical air. But when you flip the coin over, you see a portrait of his mother, Agrippina. They are shown facing each other, or sometimes as a Jew gate bust, one right behind the other. The inscriptions give them almost equal status. The message is clear: this is a co-regency. Nero is the emperor, but his powerful mother is the guiding hand, the regent. It's a brand partnership. This visual representation of shared power was unprecedented and, for traditional Romans, a little unsettling. A woman wielding such overt influence was a departure from the more subtle power of Livia. You can almost feel the political tension on these early coins. For the first year of his reign, Nero's name on the coins was on the reverse, while Agrippina S was on the front, alongside his portrait. Then they swapped. Then they appeared together. It's a visual tug-of-war for dominance played out on a tiny metal canvas. Act 2 begins a few years later. Nero, now a young man, has tired of his mother's influence. He has her politically sidelined and eventually murdered. And what happens to the coins? Agrippina's face vanishes completely. Now the coins are all about Nero. His portrait is still youthful and handsome, but it's starting to change. The clean, boyish look is replaced by a slightly fleshier, more self-satisfied expression. And on the reverse, you see images that celebrate his passions. You see the god Apollo playing the lyre, a clear nod to Nero's own artistic pretensions. You see depictions of the new market he built or the grain distributions he sponsored. The brand is shifting from dutiful son to benevolent and artistic sole ruler. This is also the period of a major monetary reform in 64 AD, right after the Great Fire of Rome. Nero slightly reduced the weight and silver purity of the denarius. This allowed him to mint more coins from the same amount of metal, helping to pay for his ambitious rebuilding of Rome, including his own lavish golden house and to fund the army. This is a classic debasement of the currency. While it was economically necessary from his perspective for the people, it was the first sign that the money wasn't quite what it used to be. It's a subtle form of brand damage. The physical value of the coin was literally being diluted, just as the moral value of the emperor was beginning to be questioned. Act 3 is where Nero's brand transformation becomes truly startling. You're now in the later years of his reign. You get a new bronze sestertius, a large and impressive coin. You look at the emperor's portrait, and you might do a double take. The handsome youth is gone. In his place is a heavy-set man with a thick neck, a double chin, and an elaborate, tiered hairstyle. H.E.S. also sporting a noticeable neck beard, a style choice that was unique to say the least. This is the infamous Fat Nero portrait. Historians have long debated the meaning of this dramatic change. Is it simply a realistic depiction of an emperor who had let himself go, indulging in the excesses of court life, or is it a deliberate stylistic choice? Some art historians argue that this new Baroque and fleshy portrait style was Nero's way of breaking from the cold, classical tradition of Augustus. He was an artist, a performer. He saw himself as a great Hellenistic patron king, not a Roman magistrate. This new, flamboyant portrait, with its focus on luxury and substance, might have been his attempt to create a new artistic imperial look. It was his personal signature, a rejection of the old, stuffy brand identity. A quirky and specific reverse type from this period shows the Temple of Janus with its doors closed, signifying peace. This was a classic Augustan theme, but Nero's version is different. The temple is depicted in a much more ornate, almost fussy style. H.E.S. taking a traditional symbol of Roman peace and putting his own decorative, theatrical spin on it. It's a perfect metaphor for his entire reign, taking the institutions of the empire and turning them into props for his own personal drama. So over the course of 14 years, you have witnessed a complete brand evolution on the coins in your pocket. You saw Nero the promising youth, sharing power with his mother. You saw Nero the confident soul ruler, the patron of the arts. And finally, you saw Nero the overweight, self-indulgent aesthete. The coins are an unforgiving chronicle of his physical and political transformation. They tell the story of a brand that started with promise, flirted with artistic innovation, and ended in a spectacle of self-love that alienated the military and the aristocracy, ultimately leading to his rebellion, forced suicide. His final coins are a monument to a brand that had become completely disconnected from the values of the people it was supposed to represent. The fall of Nero in 68 AD was not like the assassination of Caligula. There was no uncle hiding behind a curtain. Nero's suicide left a complete power vacuum. And as a wise historian Tacitus would later write, a dangerous secret was revealed, that an emperor could be made elsewhere than in Rome. What followed was a year of absolute chaos, a bloody game of musical chairs for the throne, known as the Year of the Four Emperors. And the coins from this single frantic year, 16 AD, are some of the most fascinating and desperate pieces of personal branding in Roman history. Imagine you're a merchant in Spain. For years, every coin you've handled has had Nero's face on it. Then suddenly, H.E.S. gone. News travels slowly and unreliably. Before you even have time to process it, a new coin appears. The portrait is of an old, stern-looking man. This is Galba, the governor of Spain, who was the first to rise in revolt against Nero. His coins are rushed, the quality often a bit rough. He needs to pay his legions and establish his legitimacy fast. His branding is all about restoring the old ways. H.E.S. a stark contrast to the decadent Nero. His portraits are severe and wrinkled in the old Republican veristic style. He looks like a senator from a bygone era. The messages on the reverse are all about liberty, libertas, the safety of the Roman people, salvsgene, rishvmani, and the concord of the provinces, concordiaprovincium. H.E.S. branding himself as the anti-Nero, the man who will clean house and bring back traditional Roman virtues. A famous reverse type shows the goddess Libertas holding a pilus, the cap of a freed slave and deceptor. It's a powerful populist message, but for you holding this coin there's a sense of uncertainty. This man is in Spain. Does he even control Rome yet? Before you can even get used to Galba's grumpy face, news arrives. He has been murdered in the Roman Forum, and a new man, Otho, has been proclaimed emperor by the Praetorian Guard. Otho was a former friend of Nero, a bit of a dandy, and his branding is completely different from Galba's. New coins start to trickle out from the mint in Rome. Oh, those portraits are interesting. He was known to be bald and wore a wig, but you wouldn't know it from the coins. They show a man with a full, if suspiciously neat head of hair. It's a slightly idealized portrait, but not in the divine style of Augustus. He looks more like a fashionable aristocrat. His key branding message is security SEC. You are ITAS and Victor VICTOIA. He needs to reassure people that the situation is under control. A common reverse shows the goddess Securitas leaning against a column, looking relaxed. It's a message designed to calm a nervous populace. Don't worry, I've got this. But his reign is so short, only about 3 months, that his coins are relatively rare. You might have seen one, you might not have. It's like a limited edition product from a brand that goes out of business almost immediately. While Otho is minting coins in Rome, another general has been proclaimed emperor by his legions on the Rhine frontier. This is Vitellius. He begins marching on Italy. Now you've got 2 emperors at once, both issuing coins. It's a full-blown brand war. Vitellius' coins are perhaps the most infamous of the 4. He was notorious for his gluttony, and his coin portraits are brutally honest about it. They show a man with a massive, powerful head and a famously thick neck. Like Galba, he uses a realistic style, but the effect is one of brute force rather than senatorial dignity. Vitellius' branding focuses on the source of his power, the army. Many of his coins have reverses showing clasped hands, symbolizing the loyalty of the legions FI, DSEXC or CIDVM, or a tripod with a dolphin and a raven, symbols of priestly colleges he belonged to, trying to add a layer of religious legitimacy. But his most telling coin is perhaps one that honors his father, Lucius Vitellius, who had been a successful administrator under Claudius. HES trying to create a sense of dynasty, to suggest his family has a history of competent rule. It's a desperate attempt to build a long-term brand identity in the middle of a civil war. Here's a curious subplot that historians still find fascinating. During this chaotic year, some coins were issued that had no portrait at all. These are the so-called Civil War or anonymous issues. On the front, instead of an emperor, you might see a bust of Mars, the god of war, or a portrait of Libertas. The reverse would have generic patriotic slogans. Who issued these? Were they minted by generals who wanted to appear as if they were fighting for the Republican, not for their own personal power? Or were they issued by mints that were hedging their bets, unsure of who was going to win and not wanting to back the wrong horse? It's a numismatic mystery. These portraitless coins are a silent testament to the complete breakdown of the imperial brand. The throne was so contested that, for a moment, it was safer to put nobody's face on the money. Finally, as the year draws to a close, a 4th man enters the fray. Vespasian the Tough, no-nonsense general who had been putting down a revolt in Judea. His legions in the east proclaim him emperor. He has control of Egypt, Rome's granary, which gives him a decisive advantage. Vitellius is defeated and killed. The bloody year is over. Vespasian is the last man standing. For you, the citizen, this year has been a whirlwind of faces and slogans. Galba, Otho, Vitellius, each one a different brand, a different promise, appearing and disappearing in rapid succession. The money in your purse has become a confusing mess of competing logos. The chaos of Constantine AD demonstrated that military might was the ultimate deciding factor in who got to be emperor, but it also proved that as soon as a general seized power, his very first act was to start minting coins to launch his own personal brand. In the ancient world, you weren't truly an emperor until your face was on the money. Out of the wreckage of Constantine AD, a new emperor and a new dynasty emerged. This was Titus Flavius Vespasianus, or Vespasian as we know him, and his approach to personal branding was a breath of fresh, unpretentious air. He was a blue-blooded aristocrat like the Giulio Claudia NS. He came from a family of tax collectors and soldiers, the Italian middle class. He was a practical, experienced, 60-year-old general with a reputation for being down-to-earth and having a wry sense of humor. And he used his coinage to project exactly that image. You are now living under the new Fabian dynasty. You get your hands on one of the new denarii. The first thing you notice about Vespasian's portrait is that he is not trying to be Augustus. There is no divine, youthful perfection. Instead, you see the face of a tough old soldier. His head is bald on top, his face is etched with wrinkles, and he often has a strained expression, as if he is concentrating hard on a difficult problem, which, given the state of the empire, he probably was. Some of his portraits are so realistic you can almost see the warts. This was a deliberate and brilliant branding choice. After the surreal theater of Nero and the chaotic brand war of the four emperors, Vespasian's rugged, unglamorous face was a promise of stability and common sense. It was the veristic style of the old republic reborn. The portrait said, "I am not a god. I am not a boy emperor. I am an experienced man who has worked his way to the top, and I am here to fix things." It was a brand built on authenticity and competence, not on divine right or aristocratic lineage. The reverse of his coins hammered this message home. He had a massive treasury to refill and a city to rebuild. One of his most famous and important coin types shows the goddess Sphex be setting fire to a pile of captured armor with a tool. The inscription reads, "Paxavgvst." He is co-opting Augustus's great brand promise, peace, but with a more active, forceful image. This isn't the relaxed, lounging piece of Augustus's era. This is a piece that has been decisively won through military victory and is now actively cleansing the world of the tools of war. But his most direct and powerful branding came from the coins commemorating the victory he had just won in the Jewish war. His son, Titus, had captured and destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. This was a hugely significant military achievement, and Vespasian made sure everyone knew about it. He issued a massive series of coins with the inscription IVDII, CIPTI, Judea has been captured. The imagery was stark and powerful. It typically showed a weeping Jewish woman sitting under a palm tree, sometimes with a bound male captive standing nearby. This Judea Capta series was an empire-wide media campaign. It was minted in gold, silver, and bronze at multiple mints across the empire for many years. It was an unmistakable message of Roman dominance and a warning to any other province that might be thinking of rebellion. But it also served another purpose. It funded the construction of one of Rome's most iconic buildings. It is widely believed that the spoils from the Jewish war advertised on these coins paid for the building of the Colosseum. Every time you handled a IVDII, CAPTA coin, you were holding a tiny advertisement for the empire's military might and a contribution to its greatest entertainment venue. Now for a wonderfully quirky detail that reveals Vespasian's practical, no-nonsense character. One of the ways he refilled the treasury was by introducing new taxes, including, famously, a tax on the public latrines of Rome. When his son Titus complained that this was undignified, Vespasian reportedly held a coin under his nose and asked if it smelled. When Titus said no, Vespasian replied, "See you ain't on Olet, money doesn't stink." While this story is probably apocryphal, it perfectly captures his public persona, and it's reflected in his coinage. Some of his coin reverses simply depict priestly implements, a ladle, a sprinkler, a tripod. These were symbols of traditional Roman piety, sure, but historians have argued they also carried a more subtle message. They were symbols of the state's official cults, which Vespasian controlled, and thus a reminder of the state's authority to levy taxes and control public funds for religious and secular purposes. It's a very sober, bureaucratic message compared to Nero's lyre playing Apollo. The academic debate around Vespasian's branding often centers on this question. Was his man of the people image a genuine reflection of his personality, or was it an incredibly sophisticated piece of political theater, every bit as calculated as Augustus' divine serenity? Most historians lean toward a bit of both. He likely was a pragmatic and unpretentious man, But he and his advisors were also smart enough to know that this was the perfect brand identity for a post-Nero Rome. They leaned into it, creating a consistent and reassuring image of a frugal, hard-working emperor who was putting the empire's official house back in order. So you, as a Roman citizen, finally had a sense of stability. The face on the coin was no longer changing every few months. It was the face of a reliable, if slightly grumpy, old general. The coin in your hand told a story of hard-won peace, military victory, and official responsibility. It was exciting. It was glamorous. But after the madness you had just lived through, it was exactly what the Roman brand needed. It was boring, and boring felt wonderfully safe. Vespasian did something that the Julio-Claudia Ines had struggled with for a century. He successfully established a direct, father-to-son succession. He had two sons, Titus and Domitian, and from the very beginning of his reign he made it clear that they were his intended heirs. He was building the Flavian brand not just for himself but for his family. The coinage was, as always, the primary tool for this. While Vespasian was still alive, you would have seen coins issued with his portrait on the front, and on the reverse, portraits of his sons, Titus and Domitian, styled as Caesar. This was the same strategy Augustus had used with Gaius and Lucius. But Vespasian was even more direct. He was effectively saying, "This is a family business now." He famously joked that either my sons will succeed me or no one will. The coins backed up this bold claim. When Vespasian died of natural causes in 79 AD, the transition was seamless. His older son, Titus, became emperor, and if ever an emperor had a brand built on pure goodwill, it was Titus. He was handsome, charming, and had a reputation for generosity. His short reign was marked by two major disasters. The eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, which buried Pompey and Herculanuma, and a great fire in Rome in 80 AD. In response, Titus poured his personal wealth into relief efforts, earning him immense popularity. His coinage reflects this beloved ruler brand. His portraits show a man who looks like a younger, more refined version of his father. He has the same strong Flavian features, but with a softer, more benevolent expression. The reverses of his coins are full of positive, reassuring imagery. You see figures like Annona, promising a steady grain supply, and Felicitas, the personification of happiness and good fortune. One notable reverse type shows Electus Ternium, a sacred banquet where statues of the gods were laid out on couches. This was a ceremony to restore divine favor after a disaster, and by putting it on a coin, Titus was advertising his piety and his efforts to heal the state. His brand was all about being the compassionate caretaker of the Roman people. He was so popular that he was known as the delight and darling of the human race. But his reign was tragically short. After just 2 years, Titus died of a fever, and the throne passed to his younger brother, Domitian. And this is where the Flavian brand takes a sharp, dark turn. Domitian was the opposite of Titus in almost every way. Where Titus was charming and loved, Domitian was paranoid, autocratic, and deeply insecure. He had spent most of his father's and brother's reigns in the background, and he harbored a deep resentment. When he finally became emperor, he was determined to assert his authority in a way that his brother never had. You can see the shift in the coinage almost immediately. Domitian's portraits change over his 15-year reign. He starts off looking very similar to Titus, emphasizing dynastic continuity. But as the years go by, his features become harder, more severe. His expression is stern, almost arrogant. There is none of the warmth of his father or brother. This is the face of an absolute ruler. The real story, though, is on the reverse of his coins. Domitian was obsessed with his own divinity, while Augustus had been coy about it, and even Vespasian was famously cynical, I think him becoming a god. He supposedly joked on his deathbed. Domitian demanded to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, master and god, while he was still alive. This was a shocking breach of tradition, and his coins reflect this megalomania. You start to see an abundance of images of Jupiter, the king of the gods, on his coins. Domitian's message was not subtle. He was Jupiter's chosen representative on Earth. A very common reverse type shows Jupiter seated, holding a thunderbolt and scepter. This was Domitian associating his own rule with the supreme power of the heavens. Even more tellingly, He minted coins showing his infant son, who died young, seated on a globe, reaching for the stars. The child was being depicted as a new baby Jupiter. Domitian was trying to create a divine dynasty in the most literal way possible. Here's a peculiar detail that showcases his ego. Domitian completed the Colosseum, which his father had started. To commemorate this, he issued coins. But where his father and brother issued coins celebrating their military victories or their generosity, one of Domitian's most famous types from this era shows himself. A magnificent gold or S depicts Domitian seated on a curule chair, holding a branch and a scroll, being crowned by the goddess Victory. The reverse shows a detailed scene of the games and spectacles he put on for the people. The brand message has shifted. It's no longer about what the emperor does for Rome, but about the glory and majesty of the emperor himself. The academic debate around Domitian often asks whether he was a genuinely delusional tyrant or a misunderstood but effective administrator who was simply bad at public relations. He was, by all accounts, a competent, if ruthless, manager of the empire's finances and military, but his personality and his autocratic style, as reflected on his coins, created an atmosphere of fear and hatred in the Senate. He was building a brand of absolute, divinely sanctioned monarchy, and the old Roman aristocracy could not stomach it. So in the space of one generation, you have seen the Flavian brand go from Vespasian's earthy pragmatism to Titus's benevolent charm, to Domitian's paranoid absolutism. The coins are a perfect family psychodrama. Vespasian built a brand based on him here to work. Titus's brand was him here to help, and Domitian's brand was him here to be worshipped. It was a brand that could not last, and in 96 AD he was assassinated in a palace conspiracy, bringing the Flavian dynasty to an abrupt and bloody end. After the assassination of the autocratic Domitian, the Senate, for once, got to make a choice. They quickly appointed an elderly, respected, and, most importantly, childless senator named Nerva. This was a deliberate break from the hereditary principle of the Flavians. The brand was changing again. The new message was meant to be about a return to collegial, senatorial government. Nerva's reign was short, just over a year, but his coins are a masterclass in political messaging for a transitional government. You're a Roman citizen. You've just lived through the fear of Domitian's reign. You get a new coin. The portrait shows a mild-faced old man. There's no arrogance, no divine pretensions. He looks like what he is, a senior statesman. The reverse of his coins are like a checklist of promises to undo Domitian's legacy. You see reverses with inscriptions like LIBRTASP, UBLICA, public liberty, a direct repudiation of Domitian's autocracy. Another famous type shows to clasped hands, with the legend CONCORD, IIAIXCRCEITU, Concord of the armies, a desperate plea for military loyalty from an emperor who had no military background. Perhaps his most significant coin, from a branding perspective, was one that read FISC, IUDAICRCALUMNIISUBLATA, which translates to the malicious charge of the Jewish tax has been removed. He was abolishing the tax paid by Jews, but he was reforming its often abusive collection methods. It was a very specific policy announcement, a piece of official PR on a coin, designed to show his fairness and moderation. But Nerva had a big problem. The army, especially the Praetorian Guard who had been loyal to the military-focused Domitian, did not respect this elderly senator. They staged a mutiny, surrounded the palace, and demanded the execution of Domitian's assassins. Nerva was humiliated and powerless. He realized that to survive and ensure a stable future, he needed the army as support, and the only way to get that was to anoint a successor who was a military heavyweight. So in a brilliant move, he adopted a man who was not related to him at all. He chose the powerful and respected general commanding the legions on the German frontier, Marcus Sulpicius Trajanus, or Trajan. This was the birth of a new system, later idealized as the era of the 5 good emperors, where the emperor chose his successor based on merit, not blood. When Nerva died, the succession was peaceful. Trajan became emperor, and with him, the imperial brand reached what many consider its zenith. Trajan was the perfect emperor in many ways. He was a brilliant general, a tireless administrator, and he knew how to manage his public image. His coin portraits project an image of mature, masculine authority. He is not a god, not an old man, not a fleshy aesthete. He looks like a commander-in-chief, strong jaw, short military haircut, confident expression. This is the face of a man in complete control. The reverse of his coins tells the story of an empire at the peak of its power and confidence. Trajan was a massive builder, and he advertised his projects relentlessly. You see coins depicting his spectacular new form, the port he built at Ostia, and the magnificent bridge he constructed across the Danube River during his Dacian wars. These coins are like a portfolio of his greatest achievements. The message was, I am building a stronger, more beautiful, more connected empire. But his most famous branding exercise was tied to his greatest military achievement, the conquest of Dacia, modern-day Romania. This was a brutal, difficult war, and it brought immense wealth, particularly gold, into the Roman treasury. To celebrate, he issued a vast number of coins. Some show Dacian captives, similar to Vespasian's IBDI, ICIPTA series. Others show Persephone's gains of Dacia defeated. But the most iconic brand statement was one he received from the Senate, which he then proudly displayed on his coinage. The Senate granted him the title Optimus Princeps, the best ruler or the best first citizen. This title started appearing on his coins everywhere. SPQROPTIMOP, or INCIPI, the Senator people of Rome, to the best ruler. It was the ultimate endorsement, the 5-star review, stamped on every piece of currency. You, as a citizen, couldn't spend a coin without being reminded that you were living under the reign of the officially certified best emperor. It's an unparalleled piece of personal branding. Here's a small detail that shows Trajan's genius for PR. He initiated a program called the Alimente, a state welfare fund that used the interest from loans to landowners to support poor children, especially orphans. It was a remarkable piece of social policy, and of course he advertised it on his coins. One famous type shows Trajan standing, while a woman representing Italy kneels before him with 2 children. It's a heartwarming scene of imperial benevolence. HES branding himself not just as a conqueror and builder, but as a paternal caretaker of his people. Historians have very little to argue about when it comes to Trajan's success. The debate is more about the nature of his rule. Was the Roman Empire truly at its happiest and most prosperous under him? Or was this just the result of a masterful, 360-degree branding campaign that papered over the cracks of a system still based on absolute power? The sheer consistency and confidence of his coinage suggest a man who was not just a great general, but also a CEO who understood his brand perfectly. He was the soldier, the builder, the provider, and officially the best. His coins project an image of such unshakable competence and success that it's almost impossible to argue with. For the person holding his coin, it must have felt like the Roman brand was at the top of its game, an unassailable global superpower led by the best man for the job. After the expansionist, all-conquering reign of Trajan, the brand was due for another shift. Trajan died while on campaign in the east, and on his deathbed, he supposedly adopted his cousin and protege, Publius Caelius Hadrianus. The succession was a little murky, with rumors that Trajan's wife Plotina had forged the adoption papers, but the army backed Hadrian and he became emperor. Hadrian was a completely different kind of man from Trajan, and he ushered in a new brand identity for the emperor, the intellectual, the traveler, the connoisseur. Where Trajan's brand was about expanding the empire, Hadrian's was about consolidating and perfecting it. The first and most obvious change you would notice on a new Hadrianic coin is the emperor's face. He is the first Roman emperor to be consistently depicted with a full beard. This was a radical departure. For centuries, being clean-shaven was the mark of a civilized Roman, while beards were associated with Greeks, philosophers, and barbarians. So why the beard? The ancient sources say he grew it to hide blemishes on his face, but modern historians believe it was a deliberate branding statement. Hadrian was a passionate Philhellene, a lover of all things Greek. The beard was his way of visually aligning himself with the Greek philosophers and statesmen he so admired. It was a signal that this was a new kind of emperor, a cultured, intellectual ruler, not just a Roman general. This new intellectual brand was reflected in the art style of his coins. The portraiture of Hadrian's reign is considered some of the finest in Roman history. The quality is exquisite, with a level of detail and artistic sensitivity that is breathtaking. His portraits mature over his 21-year reign, showing him aging gracefully, but always with that distinctive philosophic beard. But the most revolutionary part of Hadrian's branding is found on the reverse of his coins. Hadrian spent more than half of his reign traveling, visiting almost every province in the Roman Empire. He wanted to see everything for himself, to inspect the troops, to commission new buildings, to solve local problems. And he turned this grand tour into an unprecedented numismatic event. He created a massive series of coins, often called his travel series. You, as a citizen, might one day find a coin in your change that says ADENTV, IADE, IBGB, RIT, and NIAD, to the arrival of the Augustus in Britain. The reverse would show the emperor and the personification of the province of Britain greeting each other. A few months later, you might see one for Hispania, Audacia, or Africa. Most famously, he issued a coin with the reverse legendary STITUT, or IACAE, to the restorer of Achaea, Greece, showing Hadrian helping a kneeling figure of Greece to her feet. This series was a stroke of branding genius. It achieved several things at once. First, it communicated the sheer scale of the empire and the emperor's personal connection to all its parts. It told the people of Rome that their emperor was out there, actively managing his vast domain. Second, for the people and the provinces, having a coin minted that specifically celebrated the emperor's visit to their homeland must have been a huge source of local pride. It made them feel seen and valued by the center of power. It was a brand message of unity and shared identity. The emperor wasn't a distant figure in Rome, he was a guest who had walked their streets. A weird and wonderful little detail is that the Persophoniscanes of the provinces on these coins are often depicted with incredible local flavor. The figure of Aegyptia's Egypt is shown with an ibis, a bird sacred to the Egyptians. Hispania, Spain, is shown with a rabbit at her feet, as the peninsula was famous for them. Britannia is often shown as a warrior figure reflecting the province's wild frontier nature. This level of detail shows a real sensitivity to local identities, all while binding them into a single, cohesive imperial brand. The great debate among historians regarding Hadrian is about his most famous legacy, Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain. Why was it really built? The traditional view, supported by some ancient sources, is that it was a defensive fortification to separate the Romans from the barbarians. But many modern archaeologists and historians argue it was never a serious military barrier that could stop a large-scale invasion. Instead, they suggest it was primarily a tool for customs control, policing, and, above all, a monumental piece of imperial propaganda. It was a massive, 73-mile-long billboard that said, "This is the edge of the Roman world. Civilization stops here." It was a physical manifestation of Hadrian's brand of consolidation. He was conquering new territory like Trajan. He was defining the borders of the territory he already had. So, holding a Hadrian IC coin, you are holding a piece of a global travel diary. The bearded philosopher king on the front tells you the brand is now about culture and intellect. The reverse, with its detailed map of provincial visits, tells you the brand is also about unity, consolidation, and a personal touch. After the macho expansionist brand of Trajan, Hadrian's brand was more subtle, more cerebral, and in its own way just as powerful. He defined the Roman Empire not just as a military power, but as a commonwealth of provinces, a unified civilization, all under the watchful, bearded gaze of its traveling emperor. After the dynamic, travel-filled reign of Hadrian, the imperial brand settled into a period of extraordinary calm. Before his death, Hadrian, who was childless, adopted a 51-year-old senator named Antonius. A condition of the adoption was that Antonius, in turn, had to adopt a younger man, the promising young Marcus Aurelius and the less promising Lucius Verus. This was Hadrian setting up the succession for 2 more generations, a long-term branding strategy for stability. When Hadrian died, Antoninus became emperor, and he was given the honorific name Pius by the Senate, possibly because he pushed hard to have the unpopular Hadrian deified. So he became Antoninus Pius, and his reign from 138 to 161 AD is often considered the most peaceful and stable period in all Roman history. And his coinage is, fittingly, the most stable and, some might say, the most boring. Imagine your ear Roman living through this period. For 23 years, the face on the coin in your pocket barely changes. Antoninus Pius's portrait is that of a handsome, serene, middle-aged man. He has a beard continuing the style set by Hadrian, but it's neater, less philosophical. He looks like a dignified, benevolent patriarch, and as the years roll by, his portrait ages almost imperceptibly. There are no dramatic shifts in style, no sudden weight gain, no new, trendy hairstyles. His portrait is the visual equivalent of a calm, steady hand on the tiller. The reverse of his coins reflects this almost total lack of major historical events. Antoninus Pius, unlike his predecessor Hadrian, almost never left Italy. His entire reign was managed from the capital. There were no great conquests to celebrate, no grand tours to commemorate. So what do you put on the coins? You put images of peace, piety, and prosperity. The reverses of his coins are a gallery of Roman virtues. You see piety, often shown as a woman making a sacrifice at an altar. You see clementia, mercy, tranquillitas, tranquility, and concordia, harmony. You see Annona, the goddess of the grain supply, and Aquitas, the goddess of fairness. The overwhelming message of the brand is, everything is fine. The gods are happy. The people are prosperous. The state is stable. It's a brand built on the absence of drama. One of the biggest events of his reign was the 900th anniversary of the founding of Rome in 147-148 AD. This was a major celebration, and he used the coinage to mark the occasion. He issued a beautiful series of coins showing scenes from Rome's mythical origins. One famous coin shows the sow and her piglets that, according to legend, guided Annius to the future site of Rome. Another shows the wolf suckling the twins, Romulus and Remus. This was a brilliant piece of branding. At a time of supreme confidence and peace, Antoninus was reminding his people of the city's long, fabled history, connecting his own peaceful reign back to the very foundation of Rome itself. He was presenting his era as the culmination of 900 years of Roman destiny. Here's a small but fascinating detail about his coinage that shows his character. Antoninus was known for his incredible respect for tradition and law, piety. There's a particular type of large bronze sestertius that art historians adore. On the front is his usual placid portrait. On the back is a detailed depiction of the she-wolf and twins. What makes it special is the incredible artistry. The engraving is so fine, the composition so beautiful, that it's considered a masterpiece of the Roman mint. This coin was just a piece of propaganda. It was a work of art. The quality and craftsmanship of the coinage under Antoninus reflect the overall sense of order and well-being in the empire. The brand was just stable. It was a premium, high-quality brand. The great historical debate surrounding Antoninus Pius isn't about what he did, but about what he didn't do. Was his peaceful reign a mark of his brilliant, hands-off management style, a testament to an empire so well-run that it didn't need a hyperactive emperor? Or was it a period of dangerous complacency? Some historians argue that by staying in Italy and not actively engaging with the growing pressures on the frontiers, particularly in the north and east, he was simply storing up trouble for his successors. Was his brand of tranquility a true reflection of reality, or was it a beautiful illusion, a calm before a coming storm? Regardless of the debate, for the people living at the time, the Antonine brand was one of supreme security. For an entire generation, the world was predictable. The emperor was a constant, benevolent presence. The money was sound. The borders were quiet. The reverses of the coins promised peace, and for once, the reality seemed to match the PR. The coin in your hand was a token of this golden age. It was a small metal guarantee that the system was working perfectly. It was the branding of an empire that believed it had finally achieved a permanent state of grace. It was a beautiful dream, but it was about to come to an end. The peaceful dream of Antonian's Audacious reign ended the moment he died. The imperial brand was about to face a challenge it had never encountered before, a fully fledged emperor system. Following the plan laid out by Hadrian, Antonianus was succeeded by his adopted son, Marcus Aurelius. But Marcus, in a move that showed his deep commitment to duty and tradition, immediately insisted on making his adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, his co-emperor with equal legal powers. This was a totally new situation. How do you brand a dual CEO-ship? You're a citizen who for 23 years has seen one placid, unchanging face on your coins. Now, suddenly, you have two emperors. How does the coinage handle this? The solution was both simple and effective. From the very beginning of their joint reign, coins were minted for both emperors. You would find coins with the portrait of Marcus Aurelius, the senior, bearded philosopher emperor, and you would find coins in equal number with the portrait of Lucius Verus, who was younger, more handsome, and known for his more extravagant lifestyle. Their portraits are distinct, yet the style is unified. They look like two different models of the same brand. The real messaging, however, was on the reverse. The key word for the new brand was CONCO, harmony. A huge number of coins were issued for both emperors, showing the two of them standing, clasping hands. Sometimes they are in military dress, sometimes in civilian togas. The inscription reads CONCORD, IAVVGVSTORVM, the harmony of the emperors. It's a beautifully direct and simple piece of PR. The message is, don't worry about the two leaders. We are in perfect agreement. The leadership is united. This image of the two clasped emperors became the defining logo of the new administration. But very quickly, their brand of harmony was tested by crisis. The Parthian Empire invaded Roman territory in the east. The brand needed to shift from peaceful coexistence to united military strength. It was decided that Lucius Verus, the younger and more martial of the two, would go to the east to command the legions, while Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher, would remain in Rome to govern. This division of labor was reflected on the coins. Lucius Verus is out on the front lines, and his coins start to celebrate military victories. You see reverses with the goddess Victory, or with piles of captured armor. He takes on new titles on his coins, like ARME and IACUS and PA, RTH, ICUS, MAX, IMUS, celebrating his victories over the Armenians and Parthians. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Marcus Aurelius's coins are focused on domestic stability. His reverses might show the Aliment A child welfare program he continued, or images of piety and good governance. It's a coordinated branding effort. One emperor is the conquering general, the other is the wise ruler at home. Together they are the complete package. Here's a curious detail that reveals the different personalities of the two men. When Verus returned from the east in 166 AD, the two emperors celebrated a magnificent joint triumph. To mark the occasion, they issued beautiful gold coins. One type shows both of them riding in a triumphal chariot. But contemporary accounts, which are always a bit gossipy, say that Lucius Verus's lifestyle was far more lavish than Marcus's. He was a man who enjoyed luxury, and some numismatists argue you can see a subtle difference in their coin portraits. Marcus's portrait is always severe, thoughtful, and deeply serious. Verus's portraits, while still in the same style, often seem a little more dashing, a little more concerned with a fine head of hair and a well-groomed beard. It's a tiny hint of their different characters leaking through the official brand. The historical debate around this dual reign often revolves around Lucius Verus. Was he a genuinely competent general who successfully managed the Parthian War? Or was he, as some ancient sources suggest, a lightweight playboy who left the actual fighting to his subordinate generals while he enjoyed the luxuries of Antioch? The coinage, of course, presents him as a great conqueror. The truth is likely that he was a decent figurehead for the war effort, delegating effectively, while Marcus Aurelius managed the big picture from Rome. The brand, at least, was a success. But the brand partnership was not destined to last. The armies returning from the east with Lucius Verus brought back something far more deadly than Parthian treasure, a devastating plague, known as the Antonine Plague, which ravaged the empire for years. And then, in 116 AD, while on campaign against Germanic tribes on the Danube frontier, Lucius Verus suddenly died of a stroke. The dual emperorship was over. Marcus Aurelius was now the sole ruler of an empire reeling from plague and facing constant warfare on its northern borders. The brief, optimistic brand of harmony of the emperors was replaced by a much grimmer reality. You would stop seeing the face of Lucius Verus on new coins. Only the tired, sad face of the philosopher-emperor remained. The coins of his sole reign are a somber reflection of a man facing immense pressure. The reverses are filled with images of Mars the Avenger, military trophies, and solemn religious ceremonies to appease the gods. The brand was no longer about harmony, but about sheer, grim endurance. The experiment of a dual CEO-ship was over, not because of a hostile takeover, but because of fate. With Lucius Verus gone, Marcus Aurelius ruled alone for the rest of his life, a philosopher-king burdened by constant war and plague. He was the embodiment of stoic duty, and in a decision that would prove disastrous, he broke with the adoptive system of the past for emperors. He had a son, Commodus, and he was determined that his own flesh and blood would succeed him. This was a return to the dynastic principle, and it would have catastrophic consequences for the imperial brand. From a young age, Commodus was groomed for power, and the coinage reflects this. As a teenager, you start to see his face appearing on coins, at first on the reverse of his father's issues, and then on coins of his own with the title Caesar. Just as Vespasian had promoted Titus, Marcus was promoting his son. The portraits show a handsome, curly-haired youth, looking every bit the noble prince. The brand message was one of dynastic continuity. The wise philosopher was preparing his son to carry on the family business. In 177 AD, Marcus even made Commodus his co-emperor, reviving the dual ruler model. You'd see coins of the aging, weary Marcus Aurelius alongside coins of the young, vigorous Commodus. It was a brand story of age passing the torch to youth. Then, in 180 AD, Marcus Aurelius died on the Danube frontier. The 18-year-old Commodus was now the sole emperor of the Roman Empire. And the brand went from stoic philosophy to a blockbuster action movie, almost overnight. Commodus had no interest in the grim, dutiful business of governing. He quickly made peace with the Germanic tribes and rushed back to Rome to enjoy the perks of the job. His early reign tried to maintain the branding of his father. The coin reverses are full of traditional themes: peace, victory, liberally as generosity. But you can already see a shift in the portraiture. The youthful prince starts to look more arrogant, more self-satisfied. Then his real passions began to emerge on the coinage. Commodus was obsessed with gladiatorial combat and saw himself as the reincarnation of the mythical hero Hercules. This obsession began to take over the imperial brand. You start to see coins where the traditional reverse images are replaced with scenes directly related to the emperor's heroic activities. You see him dressed as a gladiator or holding trophies of the hunt. The culmination of this bizarre rebranding came in the last years of his reign. He completely lost touch with reality and declared himself a living god, the new Roman Hercules. And he minted one of the most infamous coins in Roman history to prove it. You're a merchant in Rome in 190 AD. You receive a new silver denarius. You look at the front, but instead of the emperor's portrait in a traditional laurel wreath, you see the head of Commodus wearing a lion-skin headdress. This was the signature look of Hercules. He has literally replaced the emperor's image with his cosplay of a demigod. The inscription around it doesn't list his imperial titles. It lists his Herculean ones. Then you flip it over. The reverse is even more shocking. It shows Herculean symbols: a club, a bow, and a quiver, with the inscription HE, RCULIROMANOAVG to the Roman Hercules Augustus. In the middle of the inscription is a club. He has replaced the traditional symbols of Roman statehood with the personal weapons of his fantasy alter ego. This was just a branding shift. It was a complete psychotic break, played out on the currency. He even renamed Rome Colonia Commodiana, the colony of Commodus, and this title appears on some of his late coinage. He was no longer the emperor of the Roman people. He was the divine founder of his own personal city. This Hercules branding is a fascinating and weird rabbit hole. Why Hercules? For Commodus, Hercules was the ultimate symbol of masculine strength, a hero who had overcome incredible labors and achieved divinity through his own physical prowess. By identifying with Hercules, Commodus was rejecting the philosophical, duty-bound brand of his father and creating a new one based on superhuman strength and divine favor. It was the ultimate vanity project. Historians still debate how to interpret this. Was Commodus genuinely insane? Or was he just an arrogant young man with absolute power? A deep-seated inferiority complex about his famous father, who took his love for spectacle way too far. It's hard to say, but his actions created a brand that was utterly toxic to the Roman elite. The Senate was horrified. An emperor fighting as a gladiator in the arena, even if the contest were rigged, was the ultimate degradation of the office. An emperor dressing as Hercules on the coins was blasphemous and embarrassing. You, as a citizen, would have been holding a coin that looked more like a piece of fan merchandise than the currency of a great empire. It was a testament to how far the imperial brand had strayed from the sober dignity of an Antoninus Pius, or the grim duty of a Marcus, or Aelius. The brand was now entirely about the ego of one man, and that man's ego was wrapped up in a fantasy. Like Nero before him, Commodus's self-indulgent branding was a symptom of a reign that had lost all connection to the ruling class. And it had the same result. On New Year's Eve, 192 AD, he was assassinated, strangled in his bath by a wrestler named Narcissus. The Roman Hercules was dead, and the Antonine dynasty, which had given Rome its golden age, came to a pathetic, ludicrous end. The brand was once again broken, and the empire was about to be plunged into another bloody civil war. The assassination of Commodus kicked off a sequence of events grimly similar to the year after Nero's death. First came a brief, chaotic period known as the Year of the Five Emperors, which saw a rapid succession of would-be rulers. But out of this bloody mess, one man emerged victorious, a tough, ruthless general from Leptis Magna in North Africa named Lucius Septimus Severus. With his victory in 197 AD, a new dynasty was born, and with it, a starkly different imperial brand. Severus was an outsider. He was a provincial, and his first language was likely Punic, not Latin. He was a soldier through and through, and he had seized power through naked military force. He had no time for the senatorial niceties of the Antonine age. His brand was about military discipline, dynastic ambition, and an undisguised reliance on the army. When his coins begin to circulate, the change in tone is immediate. You look at his portrait. This is not a philosopher like Marcus Aurelius or a deluded body ballad like Commodus. You see a man with a long face, intense eyes, and a very distinctive full beard. This specific style of beard, parted in the middle, became his trademark. Some historians think it was meant to evoke the look of ancient Greek philosophers or even the Egyptian god Serapis, whom he patronized. Whatever the reason, it was a unique and instantly recognizable look. His portrait projects grim determination and ruthless intelligence. The message on the reverse of his coins is brutally clear. Severus owed his power to the legions, and he made sure they knew he appreciated them. Coin reverses are dominated by military themes. You see inscriptions like FIDESEXC, RCIT, the loyalty of the Army, V, IRTUSAVG, the virtue of the emperors. He also massively increased the pay for soldiers, and it's no coincidence that the production of coinage, especially silver denarii, went into overdrive to meet this new expense. But Severus was just a military usurper. He was also a cunning propagandist. He knew he lacked legitimacy. So, he did something audacious. He retroactively had himself adopted into the family of Marcus Aurelius. He declared himself the son of the deified Marcus and the brother of the deified Commodus, whom he cynically rehabilitated and deified. On his coins, he started calling himself Divi Marcipi Filius, son of the divine Marcus Pius. It was a complete fiction, a brazen act of identity theft, but it allowed him to brand his new, military-based dynasty as a direct continuation of the respected Antonine line. He didn't stop there. He was determined to build a dynasty for his own two sons, Caracalla and Geta. Just like Vespasian and Marcus Aurelius before him, he immediately began promoting them on the coinage. From a very young age, you see the faces of the two boys on the reverses, styled as Caesar. Soon, they were elevated to co-emperors Augustus, and the coins began to broadcast a new brand, the Severandomus, or house. You would see coins with the portrait of Septimus Severus on the front, and on the back, the portraits of his wife, Julia Domna, and their two sons. The message was clear: we are the new imperial family. Power is hereditary, and it comes from us. Julia Domna herself was a major part of this branding. She was a highly intelligent and influential Syrian woman from a family of high priests. On the coins, she was given titles like Mater Castro, a mother of the army camps, and Mater Patria, mother of the fatherland. She was portrayed as the matriarch of this new, military-based dynasty, a powerful figure in her own right who connected the emperor to the loyalty of the soldiers. Here's a curious detail that reveals the Severan brand's focus. Septimus Severus was from North Africa, and his wife was from Syria. This was the first truly provincial dynasty. And while he didn't advertise his African origins explicitly on most coins, he did pour enormous resources into his hometown of Leptis Magna, turning it into a spectacular city of marble. On some rare locally issued coins, you can see references to African deities like Mielcuart Hercules, a nod to his Punic heritage. It's a subtle reminder that the center of gravity in the empire was beginning to shift away from Roman Italy. The brand was becoming more cosmopolitan, less traditionally Roman. The academic debate around Severus is perennial. Was he the man who saved the empire from another prolonged civil war, a necessary strongman who re-established order? Or was he the man who broke the system for good? By openly stating that his power came from the army, by telling his sons to enrich the soldiers and scorn all other men, he fundamentally changed the nature of the emperorship. He replaced the Augustan model of the first citizen with an open military monarchy. The brand was no longer about a partnership with the Senate, it was about a contract with the legions. Holding a Severan coin, you are holding a piece of this new reality. The forked bearded emperor on the front is a soldier, not a statesman. The military standards on family portraits on the back tell a story of a power base built on swords and sons. It's a hard-edged, unsentimental brand. The soft glow of the Antonine Golden Age was gone, replaced by the cold, hard glint of steel. The dynastic brand that Septimus Severus built with such ruthless efficiency was designed to be passed on to his two sons, Caracalla and Geta. He had made them co-emperors, and on his deathbed in 211 AD, he supposedly told them to get along, pay the soldiers, and ignore everyone else. They failed at the first part, with horrifying consequences that were played out on the imperial coinage. From the moment their father died, the two brothers hated each other. They couldn't even live in the same palace without fear of being poisoned. But for a brief period, they tried to maintain the fiction of a united front. You are a Roman citizen in late 211 AD. You see new coins being minted. Some have the portrait of Caracalla, the elder, more aggressive brother. Others have the portrait of Geta, the younger one. Their portraits are very similar, both showing young men with the same short, military-style hair cut in the beginnings of a beard. The reverses of these coins scream a message of forced unity. You see all the old themes of concord and harmony. There are images of the two brothers standing unclasping hands, just like Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus. There are inscriptions like CONCONCORDIEIETRNA to eternal harmony and DEFILICATASP, UBLICA, thy public happiness. The branding is desperately trying to convince the world that the joint succession is working. The imperial PR machine is working overtime to project an image of a happy, united family. But the reality was poisonous. The rivalry became so intense that they allegedly planned to divide the empire in two, with Caracalla ruling the west and Geta the east. Before this could happen, Caracalla decided on a more permanent solution. In December of 211, under the pretext of a reconciliation meeting, he had his mother, Julia Domna, summon Geta to her apartments. There, in his own mother's arms, Caracalla had his centurions murder his younger brother. What followed was one of the most chilling acts of propaganda in Roman history, a damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. Caracalla, now the sole emperor, declared Geta an enemy of the state. His name was chiseled off inscriptions on public buildings all over the empire. His statues were torn down, and most significantly for our story, his face was obliterated from the coinage. This was a subtle process. Mint workers would take existing coins that depicted both brothers and would literally scratch out or deface the image of Geta. But the real work was in the mints themselves. The production of coins bearing Geta's portrait stopped overnight. From that day forward, the Severin brand had only one son. This is where the story gets really interesting for numismatists. While the official policy was to erase Geta, the empire was a vast place. In remote provinces, the news might have traveled slowly, or the local officials might have been less than diligent. Because of this, a small number of Geta's coins survive. Finding a coin of Geta, especially a high-quality silver denarius, is a special prize for collectors. Each one is a small act of survival, a tiny ghost resisting its own erasure. With Geta gone, Caracala's personal brand could finally take center stage. And it was a brand built on pure military aggression. His official coin portraits are famous for their distinctive style. He is almost always shown with a ferocious scowl, his head turned sharply, his brow furrowed. It's a look of intense, brutal energy. He wanted to look like Alexander the Great, another of his idols, and this aggressive, head-turned pose became his signature look. It's a portrait that says, "Do not mess with me." The reverse of his coins reinforce this. They are filled with images of war gods like Mars and military symbols. He spent almost his entire reign on the frontiers, campaigning endlessly. And it was during his reign in 212 AD that he issued the famous Constitutio Antoniniana, the edict that granted Roman citizenship to nearly all free inhabitants of the empire. Historians still debate his motives for this. Was it a grand, unifying gesture, or was it, as the ancient historian Cassius Dio claims, a cynical tax grab, since many new citizens would now be subject to Roman inheritance taxes? The edict itself is not directly celebrated on the mainstream coinage, which remains a source of academic puzzlement. Why wouldn't you advertise your single most significant piece of legislation? Perhaps because the real brand message was always simpler military power. A fascinating, quirky legacy of his reign is his name. We called him Caracalla, but that was a nickname, never used on his coins. It referred to a type of long, hooded Gallic cloak that he made fashionable. On his coins, his official name was always Marcus Aurelius Antonius, continuing that fictional link back to the Antonine dynasty. It's a classic case of a brand's official name being completely different from what people actually call it. The story of Caracalla and Geta is a brutal lesson in brand succession. Septimus Severus had created a powerful dynastic brand, but he cowed and controlled the personalities of his heirs. The brand that was meant to be about the house of Severus devolved into a murderous, sibling rivalry. The coin in your hand from 211 AD might tell a story of harmony, but a coin from 212 AD tells a story of fratricide and derasure. It's a stark reminder that behind the carefully crafted images of unity on the coins, the reality of imperial power could be a bloody family affair. After Caracalla was assassinated by one of his own soldiers in 217 AD, the Roman Empire spiraled into a period of chronic instability known as the 3rd Century Crisis. For the next 50 years or so, the imperial brand became a chaotic, rapidly changing mess. Emperors rose and fell with terrifying speed. Most were generals proclaimed by their armies, who ruled for a few years or even just a few months before being overthrown and killed by the next ambitious commander. This is the era of the barracks emperors. And for you as a citizen, the money in your pocket became a confusing and unreliable gallery of strangers. You might just be getting used to the face of one emperor, say, Macarianus, the man who overthrew Caracalla, when news would arrive that HES been defeated and killed, and a new emperor, the Byzantine age-son priest Elagabalus, is now in charge. The coin portraits from this period are a fascinating snapshot of the chaos. The fine artistry and careful branding of the Antonine or even the Sever and period vanished. The need was to get coins out fast to pay the troops who had just put you on the throne. The portraits are often crude, stylized, and look like they were engraved in a hurry. The emperors are depicted as stern, anxious-looking military men, often with the short, buzzed haircut of a common soldier. The brand, if you can call it that, was simply "I am a soldier, and I am in charge for now." The quality of the metal itself also took a nosedive. The silver denarius, the backbone of the currency for centuries, became increasingly debased. To pay the ever more demanding armies, emperors were forced to mix more and more copper and bronze into the silver coins. Under the Severus, the denarius was about 40–50% silver. By the middle of the 3rd century, the main silver coin, now called the Antoninus, a double denarius introduced by Caracalla, was little more than a bronze coin with a thin silver wash. You could literally see the brand appreciating in your hand. An old coin of Trajan or Hadrian felt and looked like real silver. A new coin of an emperor like Gallienus or Claudius Gothicus was lighter, looked coppery, and the silver wash would often wear off quickly, revealing the cheap metal underneath. This debasement fueled rampant inflation. Prices for everyday goods skyrocketed. The trust that people had in the currency, the very foundation of the imperial brand, was shattered. It's the ancient equivalent of a government just printing money relentlessly to pay its debts. Amidst the chaos, there are countless strange and fleeting imperial brands. Take Maximinus Thrax, a Thracian peasant who, according to sources, was a giant of a man and the first emperor never to even visit Rome during his reign. His coin portraits are some of the most striking of the era, showing a man with a massive jaw and a famously prominent chin and brow. It's a face that screams brute force. His brand was pure military might, and his reign was a 3-year campaign of war and extortion. Or consider Philip the Arab. He was a Roman citizen from the province of Arabia, and his reign coincided with a major milestone, the 1000th anniversary of the founding of Rome in 248 AD. Just like Antoninus Pius had for the 900th anniversary, Philip seized this massive branding opportunity. He threw spectacular games in Rome and issued a whole series of commemorative coins. You would have seen coins celebrating the new century SA, ECULUMNOVUM, and featuring a variety of exotic animals that were displayed in the Colosseum, like lions, hippos, and stags. It was a brief, bright spot of branding, a moment of celebrating Roman history in the middle of a century of decline. But it didn't last. Philip was killed in battle by his successor, Audacious, just a year later. This period also saw the empire itself fracture. For a time, a breakaway Gallic empire formed in the West Gaul, Britain, and Spain, and in the east, the city of Palmyra carved out its own kingdom. These splinter states, of course, minted their own coins. You might be in Gaul and see coins of an emperor named Postumus, whose portraits are often of surprisingly high quality, a deliberate attempt to brand his regime as more stable and Roman than Rome itself. In the east, you might see coins of the famous Queen Zenobia of Palmyra and her son Vieboledas, sometimes even showing a joint portrait with the official Roman Emperor Aurelian, a delicate piece of political branding that tried to acknowledge Rome's authority while asserting local autonomy. The academic debate about the 3rd century crisis is vast. What was the primary cause? Was it economic collapse, constant civil war, external pressures from new barbarian confederations and a resurgent Persian Empire, or a series of plagues? The answer is likely all of the above. The coins are a primary piece of evidence for all these theories. They show the rapid turnover of rulers, the collapse in artistic standards, the debasement of the metal, and even the political fragmentation of the empire. For the average person, this was a time of deep anxiety. The coin in your purse was no longer a reliable symbol of a stable world order. It was a flimsy, fast-changing token of a brand in absolute freefall. The face staring back at you was likely to be a stranger, and a dead one at that. In the midst of the chaos and crude coinage of the 3rd century crisis, there was a brief but fascinating attempt to revive the imperial brand's artistic and intellectual prestige. This happened during the reign of the Emperor Gallienus, who ruled as sole emperor from 260 to 268 AD, a period when the empire was beset by invasions, plague, and breakaway regions. Gallienus was an unusual figure for a barracks emperor. While he was a capable military man, he was also highly educated and a great admirer of classical Greek culture, much like Hadrian had been. In a time of brutal pragmatism, He tried to re-inject a little bit of high culture into the imperial brand. This effort is often called the Gallian Icy Renaissance. You are a citizen living through this dark period. Most of the coins you see are ugly coppery and feature grim-looking soldiers. But then you might come across a new coin from the Mint of Rome that looks different. The portrait of Gallienus is still that of a military man, but the style is more refined. The engraving is more delicate. He doesn't have the thuggish look of a Maximinus Thrax. He looks more thoughtful, sometimes with a longer beard and a slightly melancholy expression. The real innovation, however, is on the reverse. Gallienus issued an extraordinary series of coins, mostly bronze Antonini and I, dedicated to the gods of the Roman pantheon. This was unusual in itself, but the sheer scale and specificity of the series were new. There were coins for Jupiter, Juno, Minerva, Apollo, Diana, Mars, Neptune, pretty much every major god you can think of. Each coin featured the god's image and an inscription dedicating the coin to them, like IOV, ICONSC, ORI to Jupiter the Preserver, or APOLL, INICONSCOV8E to Apollo the Preserver. This series is often interpreted as a desperate appeal for divine help. The empire was falling apart, so the emperor was systematically calling on every god in the divine Rolodex for aid. It was a branding campaign aimed at the heavens, but it was also aimed at the people. It was a message of piety, a promise that the emperor was doing everything he could on a spiritual level to save the state. But Gallienus went even further. He issued an incredibly strange and wonderful series of coins known to numismatists as zoo or consecration series. These coins were minted after his wife, Solaninae, died. They are small bronze coins, and on the reverse, they feature a variety of animals, both real and mythical. You can find a deer, a gazelle, a griffin, a pegasus, a centaur. Each animal is paired with the inscription CONSECRATIO. What on earth does this mean? Consecratio was the word used for the deification of an emperor or empress. So, these coins are related to the deification of his late wife. But why the animals? This is one of those fantastic historical puzzles with no definitive answer. The leading theory is that each animal was sacred to a particular god. The deer was sacred to Diana, the Pegasus to Apollo, and so on. The coins were a complex, allegorical way of saying that the divine spirit of the empress was being welcomed into the company of all the gods. It's an incredibly intellectual and poetic piece of branding, especially for a coin that was, by this point, made of very poor quality metal. It's a high-concept message on a low-budget medium. The artistic style of these coins is also remarkable for the era. They have a delicate, almost ethereal quality. The engravers in the Rome Mint under Gallienus achieved a level of artistry that was completely out of step with the crude, chunky style of most other mints at the time. It was a brief flicker of classical elegance in a dark age. The debate among historians is whether this Gallian icy renaissance was a genuine cultural revival or just the pet project of a single, unusual emperor. Did it have any real impact on the broader culture of the time? Probably not. It was a bubble of classicism confined to the court and the Mint of Rome. For the soldier on the Rhine frontier, the brand was still about getting paid, not about pictures of mythical creatures. Gallienus' reign ended like so many others in this period. He was murdered by his own senior officers, who felt he was not a tough enough soldier to handle the empire's crises. They replaced him with a series of no-nonsense, hard-as-nails Illyrian generals who would eventually put the empire back together. But for a few years, the imperial brand took a strange and fascinating detour. Gallienus tried to fight the crisis not just with swords, but with culture. He tried to rebrand the emperor not just as a warlord, but as a pious intellectual. The coin in your hand with its elegant portrait and its graceful gazelle was a tiny, fleeting testament to this idea. It was a message that even in the darkest of times, the brand could still remember its classical, poetic soul, even if that memory was printed on cheap, debased bronze. The brief artistic flicker of Gallienus' reign was extinguished by his murder. The empire needed a savior, not a poet. What followed was a series of tough, pragmatic emperors from the Danubian provinces of Illyricum, who would claw the empire back from the brink of total collapse. The most effective of these was a man named Aurelian. Aurelian ruled for only 5 years, 275 AD. But his energy was boundless. He defeated the Goths, the Vandals, and the Jotungi. He drove the armies of the Pommeranian Empire out of the eastern provinces and reconquered the breakaway Gallic Empire in the west. He was a whirlwind of military action, and he used his coinage to build a new, powerful, and desperately needed imperial brand, the Restorer. Roman in the early 272. The empire is fragmented, the economy is in ruins, and barbarian tribes are raiding deep into Italy itself. It feels like the end of the world. Then, a new emperor, Aurelian, takes charge. The first thing he does is build a massive new set of defensive walls around the city of Rome, the first in centuries. It's a stark admission of how dangerous the world has become, but it's also a powerful branding statement. I will protect the heart of the empire. His coins reflect this new energy. The portraits show a stern military man, very much in the barracks emperor style. But there's a new confidence in his expression. This isn't the anxious look of his predecessors. This is the face of a man with a plan. The reverse of his coins broadcasts his mission to the world. He takes on powerful new titles that become his brand slogans. You see inscriptions like RESTITUT or ORBIS, the restorer of the world. This was his core brand identity. He was just another general fighting for power. He was the man ordained to put the broken world back together. Another common title was PACATORO or BIS, the pacifier of the world. The message was one of total, global restoration under his command. He also heavily promoted the worship of a specific deity, Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. While sun worship had been around for a while, Aurelian made it the central cult of the Roman state. He built a magnificent new temple to Sol and Roman declared the sun god to be the supreme protector of the empire. This was a brilliant branding move. In a time of chaos and darkness, the brand was now associated with the one constant, life-giving force in the universe, the sun. His coins are filled with images of Sol. You see the god, radiant and youthful, holding a globe, raising his hand in a gesture of power. The inscription often reads ORINSAVG, the rising of the emperor, linking the emperor's arrival to the rising sun. Or you see SOLIINV, ICTOCOMITI, to the unconquered sun, companion of the emperor. He was branding himself as the earthly partner of the most powerful god in the cosmos. It was a simple, powerful, and universal message that could be understood from Britain to Syria. But Aurelian's most significant and lasting contribution to the brand was his reform of the coinage itself. He knew that the debased, worthless currency was crippling the economy and destroying public trust. So in 274 AD, he launched a major monetary reform. He introduced a new, slightly larger bronze coin, which we now call an Aurelian Yenus. It was still mostly bronze, but it had a higher and more consistent silver content, about 5% than the junk that came before it. Crucially, these new coins were often marked with the numbers XXI, or the Greek equivalent Ka. What do these marks mean? This is one of the great unsolved mysteries of Roman numismatics. The most popular theory, though still debated, is that it was a mark of value, indicating a ratio of 20 parts bronze to 1 part silver. It was a guarantee of quality from the emperor. He was stamping his new, restored coins with a seal of approval, telling the public, you can trust the money again. This reform was not without its problems. It caused a violent revolt among the mint workers in Rome who had been profiting from the debasement. Aurelian crushed the rebellion without mercy. It was a clear sign that the new brand of restorer was not gentle. It was backed by absolute, ruthless force. The historical debate around Aurelian focuses on the nature of his religious policy. Was his promotion of Sol Invictus a step towards monotheism, a precursor to the religious revolution of Constantine? Or was it a more traditional syncretic approach, placing Sol at the top of the existing pantheon without excluding the other gods? The evidence is ambiguous, but what is clear is that he understood the power of a single, unifying symbol. The unconquered sun was the perfect logo for an empire being reborn from darkness, led by an emperor who was branding himself as the world's savior. holding one of Aurelianus' new, heavier coins. You would have felt a renewed sense of hope. The face on the coin was of a man who got things done. The sun god on the reverse was a promise of a new dawn, and the XXI mark was a pledge of quality. After decades of decay, the imperial brand, under the management of the restorer of the world, was finally starting to look valuable again. Aurelian, the great restorer, was, like so many before him, assassinated by his own men. The empire stumbled through a few more short-reigned emperors before power was seized by another brilliant Illyrian general, a man named Diocletian. And Diocletian, seeing the chaos of the past century, decided that the imperial brand and the entire system of government needed a radical, revolutionary overhaul. He didn't just want to fix the brand, he wanted to reinvent it from the ground up. His solution, established in 293 AD, was the tetrarchy, the rule of four. The job of running the vast, troubled empire, he reasoned, was too big for one man. So he divided it. There would be two senior emperors with the title of Augustus, one for the east himself and one for the west, his trusted colleague Maximian. Each Augustus would then adopt a junior emperor with the title of Caesar, who would be his apprentice and designated heir. This created a four-man leadership team, a board of directors for the Roman Empire. This new system required a complete rebranding of the emperorship, and the coinage was the primary vehicle for this change. You are living in this new era. You look at the coins, and you notice something truly strange. The individual personalities of the emperors disappear. Before the tetrarchy, you could tell the difference between Galba and Otho, or Trajan and Hadrian, just by looking at their portraits. Now, the four emperors on the coins all look exactly the same. Whether you're looking at a coin of Diocletian, Maximian, or their two Caesars, Constantius and Galerius, the face is identical. It's a generic, blocky, stylized portrait of a military man with a square jaw and a stern expression. They are completely interchangeable. This was a deliberate and profound branding decision. The new message was not about individual charisma or personal achievement. It was about the unity and stability of the imperial college. The brand was no longer Vespasian or Trajan. The brand was the tetrarchy. The portraits were not of men, they were of an office. They were saying, it doesn't matter who the individual is. The imperial power is a single, unified entity. The most famous visual representation of this is the famous porphyry statue of the four tetrarchs, now in Venice, where they are shown in pairs embracing, all looking identical. The coins were the mass-produced version of this same idea. The reverse of the coins reinforced this message of collective power and military strength. One of the most common reverse types of the era shows the genius populi Romani, the spirit of the Roman people. This was a semi-nude male figure, wearing a modius, a grain measure on his head and holding a cornucopia and a patera sacrificial dish. The inscription proclaimed the genius of the Roman people. It was a universal patriotic image, meant to foster a sense of shared identity across the whole empire, regardless of which of the four emperors was technically in charge of your region. Diocletian also continued Aurelianus' work of reforming the currency. He introduced a new large high-quality silver coin, called the argentus, and a new large bronze coin, the follis, which featured that genius reverse. For a time, the quality and stability of the currency improved dramatically. This is part of the tetrarchy brand promise. We bring order not just to the government, but to your finances. A quirky detail of this era's branding is the focus on the divine relationships between the emperors. Diocletian, the senior Augustus in the east, associated himself with Jupiter. Maximian, his counterpart in the west, associated himself with Hercules. On the coins you see inscriptions like IOVICONSC, RVATORI to Jupiter the Preserver on Diocletianus issues, and HERCULICONS, RVATORI to Hercules the Preserver on Maximianus. Their junior Caesars were then brought into this divine family. The brand was just a political college, it was a divine hierarchy. The two senior emperors were living gods, and their juniors were their divinely appointed deputies. This was a far cry from the old first citizen model of Augustus. The brand was now explicitly divine and absolutist. The great historical debate surrounding the Tetrarchy is whether it was a brilliant solution that saved the empire or a monstrous bureaucracy that accelerated the move towards a more feudal, medieval world. It certainly created stability for about 20 years. The system of succession, with the Caesars automatically succeeding the Augusti, seemed to have solved the problem of civil war. But did the faceless nature of the brand, the suppression of individuality, and the rigid, top-down control fundamentally change what it meant to be Roman? Diocletian's ultimate plan for the brand was for it to be self-perpetuating. In 305 AD, in an unprecedented move, he did something no emperor had ever done before. He voluntarily retired. He compelled his co-Augustus Maximian to retire with him. Their two Caesars, Constantius and Galerius, were smoothly promoted to the rank of Augustus. Everything seemed to be working according to plan. The machine he had built was functioning, but Diocletian had failed to account for one thing: human ambition. The sons of the retired and deceased emperors were not happy to be left out of this neat succession plan. And one of those sons, the son of Constantius, was a young man named Constantine. He was about to shatter the generic, unified brand of the Tetrarchy and create one of the most powerful personal brands the world has ever seen. The impersonal, unified brand of the Tetrarchy, so carefully constructed by Diocletian, was too rigid to contain the explosive ambition of the next generation. After Diocletian's retirement, the system quickly fractured into a new series of civil wars. Out of this renewed chaos, one man would eventually rise to dominate all the others: Constantine, the son of the Tetrarch Constantius. And with him, the imperial brand would be transformed forever by the power of a new symbol. When his father Constantius died in Britain in 306 AD, Constantine was illegally proclaimed Augustus by his father's troops. This broke all the rules of the Tetrarchy. For the next several years, the empire was a confusing mess of multiple Augustine Caesars, all vying for power. You, as a citizen, would once again see a confusing array of faces on your coins: portraits of Galerius, Maxentius, Licinius, and the young, clean-shaven Constantine. The generic, unified Tetrarchy portrait was dead. Individualism was back. Constantine's early coins show him trying to find his brand. At first, he aligns himself with the divine patrons of the Tetrarchy, issuing coins dedicated to Hercules and Mars. Then he switches his allegiance to Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, the powerful brand created by Aurelian. For many years, Constantine's primary brand identity was as the companion of the sun god. You see countless coins with his portrait on the front, and on the reverse, the familiar image of Sol with inscriptions like SOLINV, ICTOCO, MITI. For a time, his brand was a continuation of a successful popular theme. But everything changed in 312 AD. At the famous Battle of the Milvian Bridge outside Rome, Constantine was facing his rival Maxentius. According to the Christian historian Eusebius, the night before the battle, Constantine had a vision. He saw a cross of light in the sky above the sun, with the words, "In this sign you shall conquer." He ordered his soldiers to paint this new symbol, the Chi-Rho monogram of the first Greek letters of Christ, onto their shields. They won a decisive victory. Maxentius was defeated and drowned in the Tiber. This was the turning point. Constantine had found a new, and infinitely more powerful, divine patron. But he was cautious. He didn't immediately plaster the Christian cross all over the coinage. The empire was still overwhelmingly pagan. A sudden overt Christian branding would have been politically dangerous. So, you start to see the new symbol appear in subtle, almost hidden ways. It's a process that historians love to trace. At first, the Chi-Rho symbol might appear as a small mark on the helmet of the emperor in his portrait, or it might be a tiny device on a military standard on the reverse. It's a classic example of A/B testing a new brand identity. He was introducing the symbol gradually, seeing how it would be received. One of the most famous and debated coins of this period is the heavenly gaze type. On the front you see a portrait of Constantine, but he is not looking straight ahead in the traditional style. His head is tilted back, and his eyes are looking up towards the sky. It is a pose of divine communication, of a man receiving inspiration from a higher power. It's a radical departure from the stern, forward-facing portraits of the past. The brand is no longer just about earthly power, it's about a connection to the divine. But which divine? To a Christian, it looked like he was gazing towards the Christian God. To a pagan, it could be interpreted as him looking towards his old patron Saul. It was brilliantly ambiguous branding. As his power grew and he became the sole ruler of the entire empire, the Christian branding became more explicit. By the 320 seconds, the images of Saul and Vitus disappear from the coins, replaced by new reverse types. One common type shows a Roman labarum, the military standard, but now it is topped with the Chi-Rho symbol, spearing a serpent on the ground. The serpent was a multivalent symbol. It could represent paganism, or Constantine's defeated political rivals. The message was clear: the new Christianized military power was triumphing over the old evils. A fascinating quirk of this transitional branding is how pagan and Christian symbols could coexist on the same coin. You might find a coin with a traditional reverse, showing the winged goddess Victory, but in the field next to her, there is a small Chi-Rho. The old brand language was being slowly infused with the new logo. The goddess of victory was now delivering a victory granted by a new god. The historical debate over Constantine is, of course, immense. Was his conversion a genuine spiritual experience, or was it a masterful political calculation by a man who saw that Christianity, with its tight-knit organization and message of universal salvation, was the future? His coinage suggests a man who was both. The gradual, careful introduction of the new symbols points to a shrewd political operator who understood the power of branding, but the radical shift in his personal iconography, like the upward gaze portraits, suggests a man who genuinely believed he was on a divine mission. Holding a coin of Constantine, you are holding a piece of a revolution. You are witnessing the slow, deliberate pivot of the entire Roman brand away from 1,000 years of polytheism towards a new, monotheistic future. The face on the coin is no longer just an emperor. He is God's chosen agent on earth. And the small, cryptic symbol that starts to appear on his standards and helmets is about to become the dominant symbol of Western civilization for the next 2 millennia. Constantine's conversion and his consolidation of power marked the beginning of the end for the classical Roman imperial brand. The final years of his reign, and the reigns of his sons who succeeded him, saw a profound and permanent shift in what an emperor was supposed to look like and what the brand was supposed to represent. The style of imperial portraiture underwent a radical transformation, moving away from realism towards a new, abstract symbolism. You are now in the later part of Constantine's reign, around 330 AD. He has founded a new capital for the empire, Constantinople, the city of Constantine. You get a new bronze coin of Phallus. You look at the portrait of the emperor. The man staring back at you bears little resemblance to the naturalistic portraits of the past, or even to his own earlier, more realistic images. The new Constantination portrait is massive and abstract. The head is huge, dominating the coin. The features are simplified and geometric. The jaw is a powerful square. The nose is straight, sharp-lying, but the most striking feature is the eyes. They are enormous, wide open, and staring not at you, but upwards and outwards, as if fixed on a point far beyond the physical world. This is the culmination of the heavenly gaze style. It's no longer a subtle tilt, it's a direct, hypnotic stare into the divine ether. This was a complete rejection of the classical ideal of portraiture. The Augustan brand was about projecting an idealized, god-like humanity. The Flavian brand was about projecting rugged realism. The Tetrarch brand was about projecting generic unified power. This new, late Constantination brand was about projecting something else entirely, otherworldly, divine authority. The emperor is no longer just a man, not even a first citizen. He is a colossal icon, a living statue, the sacred intermediary between heaven and earth. His physical likeness is irrelevant. What matters is his spiritual status. The reverse of the coins also reflects this new, Christianized world order. The old pagan gods are gone for good. You now see new types of imagery. One of the most common is the two soldiers in the standard type. It shows two Roman soldiers leaning on their spears, and between them is a military standard, often topped with the Chi-Rho. The message is simple and powerful. The Christianized Roman army is the foundation of the state's security. Another new theme is the celebration of the new capital. To commemorate the founding of Constantinople, a special series of coins was issued. One type shows a bust of the goddess Roma in her helmet on the front. The other shows a bust of a helmeted figure representing the new city, Constantinopolis, holding a scepter and with a ship's prow at her shoulder. It was a brand launch for the new center of power, presenting it as the equal and sister of old Rome. A fascinating and slightly strange detail of this late imperial branding is how the emperor's family is depicted. After Constantine's death, his three sons, Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans, divided the empire between them. Their coins often feature reverses with inscriptions like FELTIERETIO, the restoration of happy times, a brand slogan that tried to evoke a new golden age. One of the most famous and debated images from this series shows a Roman soldier spearing a fallen barbarian horseman. It's a classic image of Roman military dominance, but the style is completely different from earlier periods. The figures are stick-like and schematic. The scene is a symbol, not a realistic depiction of battle. It's a logo for Roman victory. The academic debate here focuses on the reason for this stylistic shift. Was the move away from realism a sign of artistic decline, a loss of the technical skills that had been honed over centuries? Or was it a deliberate and sophisticated choice, a new late antique art style that was better suited to expressing the new, more abstract and spiritual concerns of a Christianizing empire? Most modern art historians lean towards the latter. They argue that this new, symbolic style wasn't a failure to be realistic. It was a conscious rejection of realism. The goal was no longer to show you what the emperor looked like, but to show you what he was, a sacred icon. So, the coin you hold in your hand in the mid-4th century is a completely different object in terms of its message from the one you held under Augustus. The Augustan coin was a message from a first citizen who pretended he was the king. The late Constantinian coin is a message from a colossal, divinely appointed autocrat who is the deputy of the Christian god. The brand has moved from the forum to the cathedral. The face on the coin is no longer a portrait of a man. It's a diagram of power, a holy icon designed to inspire and obedience. The long journey of Roman personal branding, from a dangerous selfie to a serene demigod to a rugged soldier, has reached its final destination, a pair of enormous eyes, staring into eternity. We've traveled a long way together, from a small silver coin in the hand of a Republican merchant to the otherworldly gaze of a Christian emperor. Our journey through the evolution of the Roman imperial brand is nearing its end. The story of the emperor's face on the coin doesn't stop with Constantine's sons, of course. It continues for another century in the West and for another 1,000 years in the Byzantine East. But the fundamental transformation, the one that rewrote the very definition of the brand, is complete. You are now living in the final decades of the 4th century. The empire is officially Christian. The faces on the coins have settled into that abstract, iconic style. The portraits of emperors like Valentinian or Theodosius are imposing and symbolic, but they lack the personality and individuality of their distant predecessors. The brand is no longer about personal branding in the way we've been exploring it. The emperor is now an institution, a sacred office, and the portrait is a symbol of that office, not a depiction of the man. The reverse of the coins reflects this fully Christianized imperial identity. The dominant image is often the emperor himself, portrayed as a triumphant Christian warrior. A very common type shows the emperor standing in full military gear, holding a labarum with the Cairo and a globe topped by the goddess Victory, who is now rebranded as a Christian angel crowning him. The inscriptions are bold declarations of divine right and glory, like GLO, RIROMANO or UM, the glory of the Romans, or VOT, EVMVOT, ex prayers for 5 years of rule, and vows for 10 more to come, a tradition that had started much earlier but now felt like a plea for stability in an increasingly unstable world. The small, quirky details also change. After Constantine, the Cairo symbol becomes ubiquitous. But you also start to see other Christian symbols, like a simple cross, appearing more frequently, either as a main feature of the design or as a small mark in the field. The visual language of the brand is now almost entirely Christian. The old gods, Jupiter, Mars, even Sol and Vicus are gone without a trace. They are the ghosts of a defunct brand identity. One of the last great imperial branding campaigns on coinage came from an emperor who tried briefly to turn back the clock. Julian, known to history as Julian the Apostate, was a nephew of Constantine who came to the throne in 361 AD. He had been raised Christian but secretly revered the old pagan gods and philosophy. When he became emperor, he attempted a full-scale pagan revival. His coinage is a fascinating, desperate attempt to relaunch a dead brand. His own portrait is unique for the era. He is shown with a long, scruffy philosopher's beard, a deliberate nod back to the intellectual branding of Hadrian and Marcus Aurelius. He wanted to be a philosopher king, not a Christian icon. The reverses of his coins are even more shocking for the time. He brought back the pagan gods. You suddenly see coins with images of bulls symbolizing sacrifice, or the god Serapis, or the genius of the Roman people. It was a complete repudiation of the Constantination brand, but it was too late. The empire was too far down the Christian path. Julian's reign lasted less than 2 years before he was killed on campaign in Persia. With his death, the pagan brand died for good. The final chapter of Roman coinage in the West is a story of decline. As the Western Empire crumbled in the 5th century under the pressure of barbarian invasions and internal decay, the quality of the coinage collapsed completely. The coins become smaller, lighter, and the portraits become crude, almost cartoonish stick figures. Often the mint scowled even keep up with engraving new portraits, so they would just use old dies. You might have a coin that claims to be of one emperor, but the portrait is clearly that of his predecessor. The brand identity is literally blurred and confused. By the very end, the concept of the emperor's portrait as a tool of mass communication had faded. The coin was just a piece of metal, its value increasingly uncertain. The last Western Roman emperor, the young Romulus Augustulus, was deposed in 476 AD. He barely ruled long enough to mint any significant coinage of his own. The brand, which began with the revolutionary act of Julius Caesar putting his own wrinkled face on a coin, ended not with a bang, but with a whisper. So as we look back on this long journey, what have we seen? We've seen the coin as a political manifesto, a family album, a military trophy, a travel diary, a theological treatise, and a balance sheet. We've seen the emperor's face used to project piety, power, intellect, benevolence, madness, and military force. Historians will forever argue about the specifics. Was this coin a genuine reflection of policy, or just cynical PR? How many people truly understood these complex visual messages? But the undeniable truth is that for 500 years, the small metal disc in a person's hand was the most consistent, widespread, and powerful branding tool. It carried the face and the message of the emperor to every corner of his vast domain, shaping the way millions of people perceived power, and defining the very idea of what it meant to be a Roman emperor. Now, the story is over. The clamor of the Roman forum has faded, the marching of the legions has ceased, and the clinking of coins has fallen silent. The world we have been visiting is slipping away, becoming softened and indistinct at the edges, like a memory just before sleep. The faces of the emperors, once so clear and powerful, now blur into one another. Caesar's ambition, Augustus' calm, Nero's theatricality, Trajan's confidence, they are all just whispers now, echoes in a long, quiet corridor of time. You can feel yourself drifting, floating gently on the surface of a deep and peaceful sea. The weight of history lifts from your shoulders. There are no more dates to remember, no more battles to track. There is only the soft, rhythmic hum of the fan, the gentle rise and fall of your own breathing. The journey is done. You have walked through centuries, held power in your hand, and watched an empire rise and fall, all from the safety and comfort of your bed. Now, it is time to let go. Let the last thoughts dissolve like mist. Let the darkness behind your eyes be a soft, welcoming blanket. There is nothing left to do but rest. Let the quietness envelop you. Let the tide of sleep pull you gently out into the deep. The end of the article. Good night.